In the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, a rich man, Reginald Hawthorne, is found dead in his locked study at Willow Grange. A cryptic note in his hand: "Beware the shadow at dusk." The police call it a heart attack and pin it on a vagrant, but Miss Jane Marple, the sharp-eyed old lady with a knack for secrets, knows it's murder, as chilling notes pile up, taunting the widow Clara. Miss Marple digs into the manor's dark corners, suspecting the sly manager Lyle, the bitter governess Evelyn, the nervous Dr. Weston, and even the scared stepdaughter Lily. Village gossip buzzes with clues, poison, hidden keys, buried bottles, but the truth is twisted. With her knitting needles clicking and her mind racing, Miss Marple unravels a deadly plot of love, greed, and betrayal, proving the shadow at dusk is closer than anyone thinks. Will she catch the killer before dusk falls again? Dive into this cozy mystery where every whisper hides a clue. Chapter 1. The Death at Willow Grange SD. Mary Mead was a quiet village, the kind where everyone knew your name and your business. The cottages lined up, neat and pretty, with roses climbing over fences and chimneys puffing lazy smoke. It was summer, and the air smelled of fresh grass and baking bread. Miss Jane Marple, a small, white-haired lady with sharp blue eyes, sat in her garden, knitting a pale pink shawl. Her fingers moved quick and sure, but her mind was always sharper, picking up bits of gossip like threads to weave into a pattern. She'd lived in St. Mary Mead her whole life, and nothing, not a stolen pie or a secret love, escaped her notice this morning, though the village buzzed with something bigger than usual. Miss Marple heard it first from her maid, Cherry, a young woman with a habit of talking too fast. Cherry burst into the garden, her apron flapping, eyes wide as saucers. "Miss Marple, have you heard? Mr. Hawthorne's dead. Found him this morning at Willow Grange, stiff as a board in his study. Heart attack, they say, but nobody's sure. The whole village is talking." Miss Marple's needles paused. "Mr. Hawthorne, the gentleman who bought Willow Grange last year?" Her voice was soft, but her eyes glinted with interest. Willow Grange was the grandest house near St. Mary Mead, a big stone manor with ivy-covered walls and tall windows. Mr. Reginald Hawthorne, a rich man from London, had moved in with his young wife, Clara, and his stepdaughter, Lily. He kept two himself, which made the village curious and suspicious. "That's the one," Cherry said, nodding. "Mrs. Price at the shop says he was healthy as a horse, no heart trouble at all, and now he's gone, just like that." She snapped her fingers. "Clara's in a state, crying all over the place. The police are there, poking around." Mr. Marple tilted her head. "A heart attack, you say?" She didn't say more, but her mind was already turning. Sudden deaths in big houses were rarely as simple as they seemed. She'd seen it before: a farmer's wife who fell down the stairs, a vicar who choked on his tea. St. Mary Mead had its secrets, and Miss Marple had a way of finding them out. She set her knitting down. "Cherry, fetch my hat and coat. I think I'll visit Mrs. Bantry. She's sure to know more." Mrs. Bantry, her old friend, lived at Gossington Hall, not far from Willow Grange. If anyone had the latest news, it was her. Cherry grinned. "You're going to Snoop, aren't you, Miss?" Miss Marple smiled, a tiny twitch of her lips. "I'm going to pay a neighbourly call, Cherry, nothing more." By 10 o'clock, Miss Marple was at Gossington Hall, a rambling house with many rooms in a garden that never quite behaved. Mrs. Dolly Bantry, a plump woman with a loud laugh, welcomed her at the door. "Jane, come in, come in. You've heard about Hawthorne, I bet. Dreadful business. She led Miss Marple to the drawing room, where a tray of tea and scones waited. The room was cosy, with chintz curtains and a crackling fire, but Mrs. Bantry's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Tell me everything," Miss Marple said, settling into an armchair. She sipped her tea, her face calm but her ears sharp. Mrs. Bantry leaned forward, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "Reginald Hawthorne, dead at 52. They found him this morning, slumped over his desk. Dr. Weston says it's his heart. But Clara's wife, you know she's saying it's not natural. She's been wailing to anyone who will listen. Says she found a note, something odd, but nobody knows what it says." "A note?" Miss Marple's cup paused halfway to her lips. "What kind of note?" Mrs. Bantry shrugged. "Nobody's seen it yet. Clara's keeping it close, like it's gold. The police inspector Crane's in charge, thinks she's just upset, making things up. But you know how these things go, Jane. A rich man, a big house, a young wife. It's never just a heart attack, is it?" Miss Marple nodded slowly. She thought of Mr. Sanders, a shopkeeper from years back, who died peacefully in his sleep until his wife confessed to slipping something in his cocoa. "Who was in the house when it happened?" she asked. Mrs. Bantry ticked off names on her fingers. "Clara, of course. Then there's Lily, the stepdaughter, about 16, quiet little thing. Mr. Lyle, the estate manager, lives on the grounds. Miss Evelyn, the governess for Lily, she's got a sharp tongue, that one. And Dr. Weston was there last night, checking on Hawthorne's health. Oh, and the servants, but they're local girls, nothing suspicious there." Miss Marple filed each name away. A widow, a stepdaughter, a manager, a governess, a doctor, plenty of people with reasons to want a rich man gone. Money, love, or revenge usually lay at the heart of such things. She remembered a housemaid who poisoned her master over a slight. People could be so very touchy. "Did Mr. Hawthorne have enemies?" she asked. Mrs. Bantry laughed. "Enemies? Jane, he wasn't exactly loved. Kept the village at arm's length, didn't he? And Clara's 20 years younger, tongues wagged about that. Then there's Mr. Lyle, who Hawthorne accused of mismanaging funds. And Miss Evelyn didn't like him meddling with Lily's lessons. Even Dr. Weston had words with him, something about his medicine. The man was a bear, always barking orders." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. A man who made enemies was a man who might not die by chance. "I think," she said, "I should like to pay my respects to Mrs. Hawthorne. It's only proper." Mrs. Bantry clapped her hands. "Oh, Jane, you're up to something. I'll come with you. I wouldn't miss this for the world." Willow Grange loomed ahead as Miss Marple and Mrs. Bantry walked up the gravel drive. The house was grand but gloomy, its stone walls cold even in the sunlight. Ivy clung to the towers, and the windows stared down like unblinking eyes. A policeman stood at the gate, young and bored, but he let them pass when Mrs. Bantry mentioned their neighbourly duty. Inside, the hall was all dark wood and heavy curtains, with a staircase curving up to shadows. Clara Hawthorne met them in the drawing room, a pale woman in her 30s with red-rimmed eyes. Her black dress hung loose, and her hands twisted a handkerchief. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," she said, her voice shaky. "It's kind of you to come." Miss Marple took her hand gently. "My dear, I'm so sorry. It must be a terrible shock." Her voice was warm, but her eyes scanned the room. A portrait of a stern man, Hawthorne. No doubt, a vase of wilting roses, a clock ticking to loud dot. Clara sank onto a sofa. "It's awful," Reginald was. He was fine yesterday. Then, this morning, I found him, dead. She choked back a sob. The police say it's his heart, but I know it's not. He was worried these last weeks. Kept saying someone was watching him. Miss Marple's tone was gentle, encouraging. She sat beside Clara, her knitting bag at her feet. Mrs. Bantry hovered nearby, pretending to admire a painting but listening hard. Clara nodded. He wouldn't tell me much. Said it was business, or his health. But last night he locked himself in his study, writing something. And then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded paper. I found this by his desk. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. May I see it, dear? Clara hesitated, then handed it over. The paper was heavy, with Hawthorne's initials embossed at the top. In a shaky hand, it read, "Beware the shadow at dusk." Just 5 words, but they sent a chill through Miss Marple. She'd seen notes like this before. Warnings, clues, or traps. "What does it mean?" Clara whispered. "He wasn't a fanciful man. This means something." Miss Marple folded the note carefully. "It's curious, certainly. Did you show the police?" Clara's lips tightened. "I tried. Inspector Crane said it's nonsense, just Reginald's imagination. But I know my husband. He was afraid of something or someone." Mrs. Bantry couldn't stay quiet. "Clara, who was in the house last night? Anyone who might have well?" "You know," Clara's eyes darted to the door. "Just the usual people. Lily was in her room, reading. Mr. Lyle was in his office, working late. Miss Evelyn was with Lily earlier, then in the garden, I think. Dr. Weston came to check on Reginald's heart. He left around 9. The servants were downstairs. Nobody saw anything strange." Miss Marple noted the names again, matching them to Mrs. Bantry's list. A house full of people, and not one saw a thing. She thought of a village dance where a thief slipped through. A crowd, sometimes. The busiest places hid the most secrets. Before she could ask more, the door opened and Inspector Crane strode in. He was a tall man with a moustache that looked too big for his face. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, "I need a word." He glanced at Miss Marple and Mrs. Bantry, his eyes narrowing. "Visitors at a time like this?" Mrs. Bantry bristled. "We're here to comfort a friend, Inspector. Surely you don't object." Crane grunted. "Just don't get in the way. This is a simple case, heart attack, nothing more. No need for village chatter to make it complicated." Miss Marple smiled sweetly. "Of course, Inspector, we wouldn't dream of interfering." But her mind was racing. A locked study, a cryptic note, a wife who suspected foul play. Simple, indeed. She thought of old Mrs. Finch, who swore her cat was poisoned, and turned out to be right. Things were never as simple as they seemed. As they left Willow Grange, Mrs. Bantry grabbed Miss Marple's arm. "Jane, you saw that note. It's murder, isn't it?" And Clara's scared out of her wits. "What do you think?" Miss Marple walked slowly, her eyes on the gravel path. "I think, darling, that Mr. Hawthorne's death is a puzzle. That note, it's not the sort of thing a man writes for no reason. And Clara's fear is real. Something's wrong at Willow Grange." Mrs. Bantry's eyes gleamed. "You're going to solve it, aren't you?" "Oh, Jane, you're better than any detective." Miss Marple chuckled. "I'm just an old lady who notices things, Dolly, but I do wonder about that note. Beware the shadow at dusk. It sounds like a warning or a clue." They reached the village square, where people whispered behind their hands. News of Hawthorne's death had spread like wildfire. Miss Marple saw Mrs. Price, the shopkeeper, talking to the postman, both looking grim. She caught a snatch of their words. Not natural. Someone did him in. Miss Marple's lips curved. The village always knew more than it let on. She'd start their tea at the shop, a chat with the vicar, a word with the milkman. Bit by bit, she'd find the truth. For now, she had a note, a widow, and a house full of secrets. It was enough. To begin, back at her cottage, she picked up her knitting. The pink shawl was growing, stitch by stitch, just like her thoughts. She pictured Willow Grange, its dark halls and nervous people, Clara's pale face, the inspector's dismissal, that strange, chilling note. Beware the shadow at dusk. Miss Marple's needles clicked. A shadow, she murmured. But whose? Chapter 2. The Peculiar Household. The morning sun climbed higher over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in gold. Miss Jane Marple walked the winding path to Willow Grange, her black shoes crunching on gravel. Her knitting bag swung at her side, but her mind was far from wool and needles. She thought of Reginald Hawthorne, dead in his study, and that odd note Clara had shown her. Beware the shadow at dusk. 5 words, sharp as a pin, pricking at her curiosity. The police called it a heart attack, but Miss Marple knew better. Death. In a big house like Willow Grange was rarely so tidy. She'd told Mrs. Bantry she'd visit Clara again to offer comfort. But really, Miss Marple wanted to see the households, the widow, the stepdaughter, the manager, the governess, the doctor. People, she knew, were like her knitting. Pull one thread, and the whole pattern showed itself. She'd learned that years ago, when a grocer's lies unraveled over a stolen watch. Willow Grange had its own threads, and she meant to tug them. The manor loomed ahead, its stone walls heavy and grey. Ivy curled like fingers over the windows, and the air felt cool, even in summer. A young policeman, the same one from yesterday, stood at the gate. He tipped his cap. "Morning, miss. Here for Mrs. Hawthorne." Miss Marple smiled, her blue eyes twinkling. "Yes, young man. Just a neighbourly call." He let her pass, though. His frown said he wasn't fooled. St. Mary Mead knew Miss Marple's calls often led to secrets spilling out. Inside, the hall was dim, with polished wood and a musty smell like old books. A maid, a local girl named Betsy, led her to the drawing room. "Mrs. Hawthorne's upstairs, miss," Betsy said, her voice low. "She's not herself. Keeps crying and clutching that paper you saw." Betsy's eyes darted, as if scared to say more. Miss Marple noted its servants saw everything, even if they didn't speak. "Thank you, Betsy," she said kindly. "Is anyone else about? The household must be shaken." Betsy nodded. "Oh yes, miss. Miss Evelyn's with Lily in the schoolroom. Mr. Lyle's in his office, muttering about papers. Dr. Weston stopped by earlier, checking on Mrs. Hawthorne. It's all a mess." She scurried off, leaving Miss Marple alone. The drawing room was grand but cold, with high ceilings and a chandelier that jingled faintly. The portrait of Hawthorne glared from the wall, his eyes dark and stern. Miss Marple sat on a velvet sofa, her hands folded, but her gaze roamed. A dusty bookcase, a vase of fresh lilies, a rug with a frayed corner. Small things, but they told stories. She thought of Mrs. Lane, a village widow whose messy kitchen hid a stolen ring. Houses, like people, had their tells. Footsteps broke her thoughts. Clara Hawthorne entered, her face pale as milk. Her black dress rustled, and her hands twisted a lace handkerchief. "Miss Marple," she said, forcing a smile. "You're so kind to come again. I don't know what to do." She sank into a chair, her eyes red dot. Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice soft. "My dear, it's a terrible time. But you're not alone. Tell me, how are you managing? And the others, Lily, the staff?" She kept her tone gentle, but her question was a hook, fishing for more. Clara sighed. "Lily's quiet, as always. She's with Miss Evelyn, doing lessons, but I think she's scared. Mr. Lyle's been kind, handling Reginald's business. Dr. Weston gave me something to sleep, but it doesn't help. I keep seeing that note." Her voice trembled. "I know it means something, Miss Marple." Reginald wasn't fanciful. Miss Marple nodded, her mind ticking. Clara's fear was real, but was it grief for guilt? She'd seen widows play the part before, like Mrs. Cole, who wept for her husband while hiding his will. "The note is curious," she said. "May I see it again, dear? It might help to look with fresh eyes." Clara hesitated, then pulled the paper from her pocket. It was creased now, but the words were clear. "Beware the shadow at dusk." Miss Marple studied it, her fingers tracing the ink. The handwriting was shaky, not like the bold initials on the paper's top. Fearful, perhaps. She thought of a letter from a village girl, scrawled in panic before she ran away. "Did your husband often write such things?" she asked. Clara shook her head. "Never. He was practical business, numbers, plans. It's like he knew something was coming." Her voice broke and she covered her face. Miss Marple patted her hand. There, we'll sort it out." But her mind was elsewhere. A practical man writing riddles. It didn't fit. She needed to see the study, the household, the people who moved through Willow Grange like shadows, as if summoned. The door opened and a man stepped in. He was tall, with slick dark hair and a smile too smooth. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, "I've sorted the ledgers. No need to worry." He stopped, seeing Miss Marple. "Oh, pardon me. I didn't know you had company." Clara dabbed her eyes. "Miss Marple, this is Mr. Lyle, our estate manager." Mr. Lyle bowed slightly. "A pleasure, Miss Marple, though. I wish it were happier times." His voice was warm, but his eyes were sharp, sizing her up. Miss Marple smiled back, noting his fine suit too fine for a manager's pay. She thought of a clerk who wore gold pins while his shop went broke. Money, she knew, made people bold. "Mr. Lyle," she said, "it must be hard, managing such a big place with this tragedy. Did you know Mr. Hawthorne well?" Lyle's smile tightened. "Well enough. He was particular about his affairs. Kept a close eye on everything." He glanced at Clara, then back. "I was in my office last night, working late. Didn't hear a thing." Miss Marple nodded, filing it away. "Working late, alone. Convenient. I'm sure you're a great help to Mrs. Hawthorne," she said, her tone sweet but her eyes sharp. Lyle excused himself, and Clara sighed. "He's been loyal, but Reginald didn't trust him, said money was missing. I don't know what to believe." Miss Marple's interest piqued. Missing money was a motive, plain as day. She was about to ask more when a girl slipped into the room. She was 16, with mousy hair and big, nervous eyes. "Mother," she said softly, "Miss Evelyn says I can take a break." Clara forced a smile. "Lily, dear, this is Miss Marple, a friend." Lily curtsied, barely meeting Miss Marple's gaze. Hello, Miss. Her voice was a whisper, and her hands fidgeted with her skirt. Miss Marple saw fear in her, like a rabbit ready to bolt. She thought of a village boy who trembled when his father's watch went missing. Guilt, or just nerves. Lily, Miss Marple said kindly, I'm sorry about your stepfather. Were you close? Lily shook her head, her eyes on the floor. Not really. He was strict, always telling me what to do. She glanced at Clara, then away. I was in my room last night, reading. Miss Marple smiled, but her mind hummed. A stepdaughter who didn't mourn, a stepfather who ruled with an iron hand. Another thread to pull. Reading is a comfort, she said. What book? Lily flushed. Oh, just a story about pirates. She mumbled, then hurried out, saying she had to get back. Clara watched her go. Lily's shy. Reginald wanted her to go to a boarding school, but she hated the idea. They argued about it. Miss Marple nodded. A girl pushed too far might push back. She remembered a housemaid who broke dishes after her mistress scolded her. Small rebellions could grow. The door opened again, and a woman strode in, her heels clicking. She was thin, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair pulled tight. Her eyes flicked over Miss Marple like a cat sizing up a mouse. Mrs. Hawthorne, she said. Lily's lessons are done for now. She's upset, poor thing. Her voice was crisp, with an edge. Clara introduced her. Miss Marple, this is Miss Evelyn, Lily's governess. Miss Evelyn nodded curtly. Miss Marple, I've heard of you. The village talks. Her tone wasn't friendly, but Miss Marple didn't mind. She'd met plenty like Miss Evelyn, proud, prickly, hiding something. Like the schoolteacher who snapped at everyone but cried alone. A pleasure, Miss Marple said. It must be hard keeping lessons going with such sorrow in the house. Miss Evelyn's lips thinned. I manage. Lily needs routine. Mr. Hawthorne insisted on it, though he meddled too much. Her words were sharp, like a knife slipping out. Clara winced. Reginald only wanted the best for Lily. Miss Evelyn's eyes flashed, but she said nothing. Miss Marple noted the tension. A governess who resented her employer. Another thread. Were you here last night, Miss Evelyn? She asked, her voice mild. In the garden, Miss Evelyn said quickly. I like to walk after dinner. I saw nothing. She turned to Clara. I'll check on Lily. She left, her steps brisk. Miss Marple's mind turned. The garden, near the study window. Interesting. She thought of a gardener who swore he saw nothing when a shed burned down until she pressed him. Clara rubbed her temples. Everyone's on edge. I don't know who to trust. Miss Marple patted her hand. It's natural, dear. But truth has a way of coming out. She wanted to see the study, but Clara looked frail, ready to break. Best not to push yet. May I call again? Tomorrow, and perhaps see where Mr. Hawthorne passed. Clara nodded. Of course. The study's locked, but I'll get the key. As Miss Marple left, she passed the hall where Betsy was dusting. Miss, Betsy whispered, I heard something last night. A creak near the study. Thought it was the wind, but now she trailed off, scared. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. Thank you, Betsy. Keep your ears open. A creak could be nothing, or everything. She thought of a creaky floorboard that caught a thief in St. Mary Mead. Outside, the village hummed with gossip. Mrs. Price, sweeping her shop step, called out, Miss Marple heard about Hawthorne. Folks say it's poison, not his heart. Her voice carried, and heads turned. Miss Marple smiled. People do talk, Mrs. Price, but poison, that fit the notes. Warning. She thought of a farmer's wife who slipped something in her husband's tea. Villagers never missed much. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting in her lap. The pink shawl grew, stitch by stitch, like her thoughts. She pictured Willow Grange, Clara's fear, Lyle's smooth charm, Lily's nerves, Evelyn's sharpness, and Betsy's creak. Beware the shadow at dusk. A shadow could be a person, a secret, or a lie. Her needles clicked. A peculiar household, she murmured. But which one cast the shadow? Chapter 3. The cryptic note. The sun hung low over St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across the village green. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cottage, her knitting needles clicking like a quiet clock. The pink shawl in her lap grew, stitch by stitch. But her mind was on Willow Grange and the death of Reginald Hawthorne. That note, beware, the shadow at dusk kept, circling her thoughts, sharp and strange. It wasn't the kind of thing a rich man scribbled for fun. Miss Marple knew secrets hid in small things, like the time she found a lyre by a torn button. Today, she meant to tug at more threads. She'd promised Clara Hawthorne another visit. But first, she wanted village talk. St. Mary Mead was better. Then any newspaper gossip flowed like the stream by the mill. Miss Marple put her knitting aside, pinned on her hat, and stepped out. The air was warm, smelling of roses and fresh bread from Mrs. Price's shop. She headed there first, knowing the shopkeeper's tongue was as quick as her broom. The shop bell jingled as Miss Marple entered. Mrs. Price, a stout woman with sharp eyes, was behind the counter, weighing sugar for old Mr. Gibbs. Miss Marple, she called, her voice loud enough to turn heads. Come for the news, I bet. Everyone's talking about Hawthorne. Poison, they're saying now. Not a heart attack at all. Mr. Gibbs, leaning on his cane, nodded. Heard it from the milkman. Said Clara's telling folk her husband was scared. Stiff before he died. Something about a note. Miss Marple smiled, her blue eyes soft but keen. People do love a story, don't they? What's this about poison? She picked up a tin of tea, pretending to read the label, but her ears were wide open. Mrs. Price leaned over the counter, her voice low. Betsy, the maid at Willow Grange, told me. Said she smelled something funny in the study bitter, like almonds. And Hawthorne was healthy, wasn't he? No heart trouble, my cousin says, and she knows Dr. Weston's nurse. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. Almonds, that sounded like cyanide, though she wouldn't say so here. She thought of a village baker who died years ago, his tea laced with something sharp. Curious, she said. And this note, what do people make of it? Mr. Gibbs chuckled. Clara's waving it about, saying it's proof of murder. But Inspector Crane told my nephew it's nonsense. Said Hawthorne was just a worrier, scribbling poetry or some such. Miss Marple's lips twitched. Poetry. Reginald Hawthorne, from what she'd heard, was about as poetic as a ledger. She paid for the tea, tucking it into her bag. Thank you, Mrs. Price. I'll call on Clara soon. Poor thing needs cheering. Mrs. Price winked. Cheering, eh? You're up to something, Miss Marple. You always are. Miss Marple only smiled and left, her mind buzzing. Poison, a bitter smell, a note the police ignored, pieces of a puzzle, scattered but fitting together. She thought of a jigsaw her nephew Raymond sent her, how one corner piece made the whole picture clear. She needed more corners. Her next stop was the vicarage, where Reverend Clement, A kind man with a habit of losing his glasses might have heard something. He was in his garden, pruning roses, when she arrived. "Miss Marple," he said, brushing dirt from his hands. "Terrible business at Willow Grange. I've been praying for Clara and Lily." Miss Marple nodded, settling on a bench. "It's a shock, Reverend. Have you seen Clara? She's in such a state." Her voice was gentle, but her question was a hook, fishing for news. The vicar sighed. "I called yesterday. Clara's frightened, keeps talking about that note. She showed it to me, old words, like a riddle. I told her to trust the police, but she's certain it's foul play. Lily was there, too, poor girl. Wouldn't say a word, just clung to her book." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Lily again, silent and scared. Did Clara mention anyone else? The household, perhaps? Reverend Clement frowned. "She said Mr. Lyle's been helpful, but Hawthorne didn't like him. Thought he was dishonest. And Miss Evelyn, she's sharp with Clara, almost rude. Dr. Weston was there too, checking on Clara's nerves. He seemed distracted." Miss Marple filed it away. Dishonesty, rudeness, distraction, each a thread. She thought of a Choy boy who fidgeted when questioned about a stolen hymn book. Small signs meant big truths. "Thank you, Reverend," she said, rising. "I'll visit Clara now. She needs a friend." The vicar smiled. "You're a blessing, Miss Marple, but be careful. Willow Grange feels heavy." Miss Marple nodded, her mind already on the manor. Heavy was the right word. Secrets weighed a house down like damp in the walls. She'd felt it before, in a cottage where a wife hid her husband's debts. Willow Grange looked grimmer today, its stone walls swallowing the sunlight. The young policeman at the gate recognized Miss Marple and waved her through, though his eyes followed her. Inside, Betsy the maid met her, looking paler than yesterday. "Mrs. Hawthorne's in the parlour, miss," she said, her voice shaky. "She's with Dr. Weston. He's giving her medicine." Miss Marple patted Betsy's arm. "Thank you, dear. And how are you holding up?" "It's a lot for a young girl." Betsy bit her lip. "I'm scared, miss. That smell and the steady, it's gone now, but I can't forget it. And I heard Mr. Lyle arguing with someone last night after you left. Couldn't hear the words, but he was angry." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Arguing, that's worth noting. You're a sharp girl, Betsy." She thought of a kitchen maid who overheard a plot by chance. Servants were her best allies. The parlour was brighter than the drawing room, with tall windows and pale green walls. Clara sat on a sofa, her hands clutching a glass of water. Beside her stood a man in his 40s, with greying hair and a doctor's bag at his feet. His face was calm, but his eyes flicked to Miss Marple, wary. "Miss Marple," Clara said, her voice weak, "you're so kind to come again." She gestured to the man. "This is Dr. Weston, our physician." Dr. Weston bowed slightly. "Miss Marple, I've heard of your interest in village matters." His tone was polite, but there was a bedge, like he didn't trust her. Miss Marple smiled sweetly. "Just a neighbour, Dr. Weston. I worry for Clara, and you must be busy with such a sudden loss." Her words were soft, but her gaze was sharp, noting his stiff posture. She thought of a chemist who trembled when asked about a missing bottle. Dr. Weston cleared his throat. "A sad case. Mr. Hawthorne's heart was weak, despite what some say. I warned him to rest, but he was stubborn." He glanced at Clara. "Mrs. Hawthorne needs rest, too." This talk of notes and murder writs upsetting her. Clara's eyes flashed. "It's not talk, doctor. That note was real. Reginald wrote it for a reason. She pulled the paper from her pocket, her hands shaking. Miss Marple, you saw it. Tell him it matters. Miss Marple took the note, her fingers brushing the creased paper. Beware the shadow at dusk. The ink was uneven, the letters slanted, as if written in a hurry. She looked at Dr. Weston. It's unusual, don't you think, for a man like Mr. Hawthorne to write such a thing? Dr. Weston shrugged. He was under strain: business, health, family. People write odd things when stressed. The police agree it's nothing. His voice was firm, but his fingers tapped his bag. A nervous tick. Miss Marple nodded, but her mind raced. Strain didn't explain a riddle like this. She thought of a farmer who left a coded message before he vanished. His wife cracked it and found his savings. Did you see Mr. Hawthorne the night he died? She asked. Dr. Weston hesitated, just a heartbeat. Yes, around 8. I checked his heart, gave him his pills. He was fine, just grumpy. I left by 9. He looked at Clara. I should check your pulse, Mrs. Hawthorne. Excuse us, Miss Marple. Clara waved him off. Later, doctor. I want Miss Marple to stay. Dr. Weston frowned but said nothing, picking up his bag and leaving. Miss Marple noted his hurry, guilt, or just annoyance. When they were alone, Clara leaned forward. He doesn't believe me, but I know Reginald was murdered. That note, it's a warning. He was scared, Miss Marple. Kept locking his study, checking his food. He thought someone was after him. Miss Marple's heart quickened. Paranoia or truth? Did he name anyone? Mr. Lyle, perhaps? Or Miss Evelyn? Clara shook her head. He wouldn't say, just muttered about shadows and lies. But he argued with Lyle about money, and with Evelyn about Lily's lessons. Even Dr. Weston, he didn't trust his medicine lately. Miss Marple filed it away. A man who trusted no one was a man with enemies. She thought of a shopkeeper who locked his till every night, only to be robbed by his own son. May I see the study, Clara? It might help. Clara nodded, rising. It's still locked, but I have the key. The police looked, but they didn't find much. They climbed the grand staircase, passing portraits of stern-faced Hawthorns. The study was at the end of a long hall, its door heavy oak. Clara unlocked it, and a musty smell hit them: books, ink, and something faint, bitter. Miss Marple's nose twitched. Almonds, just as Betsy said. It was gone in a moment, but she didn't forget. The room was large, with a mahogany desk, shelves of leather books, and a window overlooking the garden. Papers were neat, the chair pushed in, no sign of a struggle. Miss Marple walked slowly, her eyes scanning. A pen on the desk, a half-burned candle, a book on poisons slightly askew. Poisons. Her heart skipped, but she kept her face blank. Clara pointed to the desk. I found him here, slumped over. The note was by his hand, like he'd just written it. Miss Marple studied the desk. No ink smudges, no spilled wax, just the note, alone. Too neat, perhaps. She thought of a staged scene, like the time a maid arranged a room to hide a theft. Did the police take anything? She asked. Clara shrugged. Just his pills, to check them. Inspector Crane said it's routine. Miss Marple nodded, but her mind hummed. Pills could hide poison if someone was clever. She looked at the window locked, but the latch was loose. A shadow could slip through if they knew how. She thought of a burglar who climbed a trellis to steal jewels. Before she could ask more, footsteps echoed. Inspector Crane appeared, his moustache bristling. "Miss Marple, Mrs. Hawthorne, what's this? Civilians in my crime scene." His voice was gruff, but his eyes were tired. Clara stiffened. "It's not a crime scene, Inspector. You said it's a heart attack." Crane's face reddened. "And so it is, but we're thorough. Miss Marple, I must ask you to leave. This is police business." Miss Marple smiled, unruffled. "Of course, Inspector. I'm just an old lady, offering comfort." But her eyes lingered on the book of poisons, the loose latch, the tidy desk. She thought of a policeman who missed a clue because he rushed. As they left the study, Clara whispered, "He won't listen. But you believe me, don't you, Miss?" Marple squeezed her hand. "I believe there's more to learn, dear, and I intend to learn it." Back in the village, Miss Marple stopped at the tea shop, where Mrs. Wicks, the owner, served her a pot of Earl Grey. The shop was busy, voices buzzing about Hawthorne. "Heard the police found nothing," Mrs. Wicks said, pouring tea. "But my brother saw Dr. Weston leaving Willow Grange late, after 9. Looked shaken, he did." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind racing. "After 9, Dr. Weston said he left by 9. A small lie, but lies grew." She thought of a postman who lied about his route, hiding a love affair. "Interesting," she said. "People see so much, don't they?" Mrs. Wicks nodded. "That they do. And Betsy told me about that smell. Reckon it's poison, Miss Marple. You'll sort it out, won't you?" Miss Marple smiled. "I'll do my best, Mrs. Wicks." But her thoughts were on the note, the smell, the lies. Beware the shadow at dusk. A shadow was close. She could feel it. At her cottage, she picked up her knitting, the fire crackling. The shawl grew pink and soft, but her mind was hard, piecing the puzzle. Clara's fear, Lyle's charm, Lily's silence, Evelyn's edge, Weston's lie, Crane's haste, and that book on poisons, sitting askew. Her needles clicked. "A cryptic note," she murmured, "but it's starting to speak." Chapter 4. Whispers in St. Mary, mid the morning mist, clung to St. Mary Mead, softening the edges of cottages and muffling the cluck of hens. Miss Jane Marple stepped out of her neat little house, her knitting bag tucked under her arm. Her black shoes tapped the path, but her mind was far from the village's quiet lanes. She was thinking of Willow Grange, Reginald Hawthorne's death, and that strange note, "Beware the shadow at dusk." The words stuck like a burr, sharp and nagging. The police, led by Inspector Crane, called it a heart attack, but Miss Marple knew better. Secrets, she'd learnt long ago, hid in plain sight, like the time a missing brooch turned up in a vicar's sugar bowl. Today, she'd hunt for those secrets in the village's chatter.st. Mary Mead was a web of whispers, and Miss Marple knew how to trace its threads. People talked over fences, in shops, at church, and their words often held more truth than they meant. She'd start at the tea shop, where Mrs. Wicks served scones and gossip in equal measure. Then, perhaps, the post office, where Miss nosy but sharp, caught every rumour. Miss Marple's plan was simple: listen, nod, and let the village spill its secrets. She thought of a farmer's wife who confessed to theft over tea. People couldn't help themselves. The tea shop was warm and crowded, the air thick with the smell of butter and jam. Mrs. Wicks, a plump woman with quick hands, waved Miss Marple to a corner table. "Morning, Miss Marple. Hear about Hawthorne, I reckon. The whole village is buzzing." She set down a pot of tea and a plate of scones, her eyes gleaming. Miss Marple smiled, pouring her tea. It's a sad business, Mrs. Wicks. What are people saying? Her voice was gentle, but her blue eyes were sharp, catching every twitch of Mrs. Wicks's face. Mrs. Wicks leaned close, her voice low. Plenty, miss, they say. Clara's sure it's murder. Keeps waving that note like it's a flag. My cousin's boy, who delivers coal to Willow Grange, heard her tell Betsy it's poison. Said she smelled something odd in the study, like burnt nuts. Miss Marple's cup paused. Burnt nuts, another hint of cyanide, matching Betsy's almond smell. She thought of a village girl who died years ago, her lips blue from a laced cake. Curious, she said. And what about the household? Any talk there? Mrs. Wicks grinned. Oh, yes. Mr. Lyle's the talk of the maids. Flashy, they call. Him new boots, silk ties. How's an estate manager afford that? And Miss Evelyn, she's got a temper. Snapped at the grocer's boy for being late. As for Dr. Weston, folks say he's been jumpy, dropping things at the surgery. Miss Marple nodded, filing it away. Flashy clothes, a temper, nervous hands, itch a clue, small but bright. She thought of a tailor who wore stolen cufflinks, caught by a neighbour's eye. And Lily, the stepdaughter. Any word on her? Mrs. Wicks lowered her voice further. Shy as a mouse, that one. But my niece, who cleans at the manor, saw her crying in the garden 2 days before Hawthorne died. Said she heard Lily mutter something about getting away. Reckon she hated her stepfather. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. A girl desperate to escape. That was motive, or fear. She thought of a housemaid who ran off after her master scolded her sometimes. Fear pushed people to act. Thank you, Mrs. Wicks, she said, sipping her tea. You're a treasure. Mrs. Wicks laughed. You'll sort it, Miss Marple. You always do. She bustled off, leaving Miss Marple to her thoughts. The tea shop hummed with voices farmers, shop girls, old widows all, talking about Hawthorne. She caught snippets. Clara's too young to be a widow. Lyle's too smooth. That note's bad news. The village was a chorus, and Miss Marple listened hard. Her next stop was the post office, a cramped room smelling of ink and wax. Miss Hartnell, tall and bony, stood behind the counter, sorting letters with a hawk's eye. She spotted Miss Marple and pounced. Miss Marple, I knew you'd be sniffing about. Hawthorne's death is no heart attack, mark my words. Murder, plain as day. Miss Marple smiled, picking up a packet of stamps. You sound certain, Miss Hartnell. What makes you? Say so. Her tone was mild, but her question was a hook, fishing for more. Miss Hartnell puffed up. I hear things, don't I? The postman, young Tom, delivers to Willow Grange. Says Clara's been getting odd letters, plain envelopes. No name, just a few words inside. She hides them quick, but Tom saw one fall. Something about dusk and danger. Sounds like that note, doesn't it? Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. More notes that changed things. She thought of a blackmail case, years back, where short letters drove a man to ruin. Very curious, she said. Did Tom see who sent them? Miss Hartnell shook her head. No postmark, just slipped into the box. But Tom says Mr. Lyle's been at the manor late, even after Hawthorne's death. And Dr. Weston he mailed a parcel yesterday, looked nervous as a cat. Wouldn't say what it was. Miss Marple paid for the stamps, her mind racing. Anonymous letters, late nights, a secret parcel threads, weaving tighter. She thought of a postmistress who caught a thief by noticing his handwriting. And Miss Evelyn, she asked. Any talk about her? Miss Hartnell snorted. That one's trouble. Tom says she's always in the garden, pacing at night. Says she talks to herself, muttering about freedom. Reckon she hated Hawthorne's rules. Miss Marple nodded. A governess craving freedom could resent a controlling employer. She thought of a nanny who slipped laudanum into her master's wine to quiet him. Thank you, Miss Hartnell. I'll call on Clara soon. She needs support. Miss Hartnell smirked. Support, eh? You're after the truth, Miss Marple. Don't fool me. But her eyes were fond as Miss Marple left. The village square was busy now, with carts rumbling and children chasing a dog. Miss Marple paused by the church, where Mrs. Price was sweeping her shop's step. Miss Marple, she called, heard the latest. My nephew says the police found Hawthorne's pills. Nothing wrong with them. But Clara swears they're not the ones Dr. Weston gave him. Miss Marple's heart skipped. Tampered pills. That fit the poison talk. She thought of a chemist's wife who swapped her husband's medicine for spite. That's odd, she said. What else does your nephew say? Mrs. Price leaned on her broom. Says Inspector Crane's fed up. Wants to close the case quick. But there's talk of a stranger seen near Willow Grange the night Hawthorne died. Rough-looking, with a limp. Nobody knows him. Miss Marple's mind turned. A stranger, a red herring, or a real clue. She thought of a vagrant blamed for a theft, only to be innocent. Interesting, she said. I'll keep that in mind. Mrs. Price grinned. You'll find the killer, Miss Marple. You're sharper than Crane. She went back to sweeping, humming a tune. Miss Marple walked on, her thoughts spinning. Poison, letters. A stranger Saint Mary Mead was alive with clues, but they didn't yet fit. She needed to see Willow Grange again, to watch the household's faces. Clara's fear, Lyle's charm, Lily's tears, Evelyn's temper, Weston's nerves. Someone was hiding more than grief. She reached the manor by noon, its grey walls looming like a storm cloud. The young policeman at the gate nodded her through, used to her visits. Betsy met her in the hall, her apron twisted in her hands. Miss Marple, she whispered. Mrs. Hawthorne's in the library. She's worse today, keeps saying someone's watching her. Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her mind sharpened, watching her. Thank you, Betsy, and you have you. Heard anything else? She kept her voice kind, knowing maids saw shadows others missed. Betsy glanced at the stairs. Last night, miss, I saw Miss Evelyn in the hall, near the study. She was holding a key, looked guilty when she saw me. Said she was checking the windows, but why at midnight? Miss Marple's heart quickened. A key at midnight. That was no window check. She thought of a butler caught with a stolen key. His lies thin as paper. You're a good girl, Betsy. Keep watching. Betsy nodded and scurried off. The library was a grand room with tall shelves and a fireplace, cold and dark. Clara sat in an armchair, her face pale, a shawl around her shoulders. Miss Marple, she said, her voice shaky. I'm so glad you're here. I can't sleep. I feel eyes on me all the time. Miss Marple sat beside her, her knitting bag at her feet. My dear, you're safe. Tell me what's happened. Her tone was warm, but her eyes scanned. The room, a desk with scattered papers, a window half open, a book on the floor, poetry. Oddly out of place, Clara clutched her hands. It's that note. I can't stop thinking about it. And yesterday, I found another one slipped under my door. She pulled a paper from her pocket, smaller than the first. It read, "The dusk hides the truth." The handwriting was different, neater, but the word dusk linked it to Hawthorne's note. Miss Marple's breath caught, but her face stayed calm. 2 notes, 2 hands, blackmail or a taunt. She thought of a village scandal where notes led to a confession. This is important, Clara. Who knew about the first note? Clara shook her head. Only you, Dr. Weston, the police, and, well, the household. I showed it to Lily, hoping she'd understand. She just cried. Miss Marple nodded. Lily again, always crying. And the others, Mr. Lyle, Miss Evelyn. Clara's lips trembled. Lyle saw me with it, asked what it was. I didn't tell him. Evelyn. She laughed, said I was imagining things. But I'm not, Miss Marple. Someone's playing a cruel game. Miss Marple patted her hand. We'll find out, dear. May I keep this note, just for a bit? Clara nodded, and Miss Marple tucked it into her bag beside the tea tin. 2 notes, 1 puzzle. She needed more dot. The door opened, and Mr. Lyle entered, his smile as slick as ever. Mrs. Hawthorne, I've sorted the bank papers. No trouble at all. He saw Miss Marple and bowed. Miss Marple back again. You're a true friend. Miss Marple smiled, noting his new silk tie. Just helping, Mr. Lyle. It must be hard, managing after such a loss. Were you close to Mr. Hawthorne? Her question was light, but her eyes were needles. Lyle's smile flickered. Not close, no. He was demanding. But I did my job. The night he died, I was in my office, balancing books. Didn't see a thing. His voice was smooth, but his fingers tugged his cuff. Miss Marple nodded. Always in his office too perfect. She thought of a clerk who claimed he was working while pocketing cash. You're a great help, she said, her tone sweet but her mind cold. Lyle excused himself, and Clara sighed. Reginald thought he was stealing, said he'd prove it. Now he's gone, and Lyle's still here. Miss Marple's interest sharpened. Theft was a motive, bold and clear. She was about to ask more when Lily slipped in, her eyes red. Mother, she whispered, can I sit with you? Clara pulled her close. Of course, darling. Miss Marple's here, she's kind. Lily glanced at Miss Marple, then away. Hello, miss. Her voice was small, her hands twisting her skirt. Miss Marple saw fear, like a bird trapped in a cage. She thought of a village girl who hid her brother's crime, trembling just the same. Lily, Miss Marple said gently, I hear you like stories. Did you read anything special the night your stepfather passed? Her question was soft, but it probed, seeking cracks. Lily flushed. Just my pirate book. I was in my room. She looked at Clara, then down. I didn't hear anything. Miss Marple smiled, but her mind ticked. The same answer, word for word, rehearsed. She thought of a boy who repeated his alibi until it broke. Books are a comfort, she said. I'd love to hear about it sometime. Lily nodded and curled up beside Clara, silent. Miss Marple watched them, mother and daughter, both scared. But of what or who? As she left the library, she passed Miss Evelyn in the hall. The governess's eyes were cold, her lips tight. Miss Marple, she said, you're here often. Clara doesn't need more fuss. Her voice was sharp, like a snapped twig. Miss Marple smiled. Just a neighbour, Miss Evelyn. Were you teaching Lily just now? Her question was polite, but it poked, testing. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Yes, in the schoolroom. She's behind on her French. I was there all morning. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed all morning yet. Betsy saw her with a key at midnight. Lies, small but heavy. She thought of a teacher who lied about her hours, hiding a lover outside. The village was settling into afternoon, the mist gone but the air cool. Miss Marple walked slowly, her thoughts a tangle. 2 notes, a poison smell, a stranger lies. From Lyle, Evelyn, maybe Weston, and Lily, always quiet, always scared. St. Mary Mead's whispers had given her plenty. But the puzzle wasn't complete. At her cottage, she lit the fire and picked up her knitting. The pink shawl grew, soft and steady, but her mind was sharp, cutting through the village's words. Clara's new note, Lyle's ties, Evelyn's key, Weston's parcel, Lily's tears. The dusk hides the truth, her needles clicked. Whispers, she murmured, but they're starting to shout. Chapter 5. The locked study. The morning sun peeked through the curtains of Miss Jane Marple's cottage, casting soft light on her knitting. The pink shawl lay in her lap, growing stitch by stitch. But her mind was elsewhere, fixed on Willow Grange and the death of Reginald Hawthorne. Those notes, beware the shadow at dusk, and the dusk hides the truth, buzzed in her thoughts like bees. The police, with their gruff Inspector Crane, saw a heart attack, but Miss Marple saw a puzzle, a locked study, a bitter smell, whispers of poisons, more clues, but they added up. She'd learned that years ago, when a missing key caught a thief in St. Mary Mead. Today, she'd visit the study itself, where Hawthorne died, to find more pieces. Miss Marple pinned on her hat, tucked her knitting bag under her arm, and stepped into the village. St. Mary Mead was awake, its lanes filled with the clatter of carts and the chatter of neighbours. The air smelled of fresh bread and dew, but gossip hung heavier. She caught snippets as she passed the baker's. Clara's sure it's murder. Lyle's too fancy for his job. That note's a warning. The village was a net, catching every rumour, and Miss Marple knew how to pull its strings. But the study was her goal rooms, like people, held secrets if you looked close. She stopped first at the church, where Mrs. Bantry was arranging flowers for Sunday service. "Jane," Mrs. Bantry called, her voice booming. "Off to Willow Grange again. You're up to your tricks, aren't you?" Her eyes sparkled, eager for news. Miss Marple smiled, adjusting her gloves. "Just a visit, Dolly. Clara's in a state, and I promised to look at the study. Have you heard anything new?" Her tone was light, but her question was a hook, fishing for village talk. Mrs. Bantry set down a vase of roses. "Plenty. My maid says Clara's been asking about poisons, went to the chemist, all secretive. And Mr. Lyle was seen at the pub, buying drinks like he's rich. Folks say he's got money hidden somewhere. Oh, and Lily, she's been sneaking out at night. My gardener saw her near the manor's gate." Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. Poisons, money, snickinage, a thread in the web. She thought of a shop girl who asked about rat poison, then cried when her beau died. "Curious," she said. "And Dr. Weston, Miss Evelyn." Mrs. Bantry leaned close, whispering. "Weston's been odd-snapped at his nurse for misplacing a bottle, and Evelyn, she told the vicar Lily's too soft, needs toughening. Sounds like she didn't like Hawthorne's way with the girl." Miss Marple nodded, filing it away. A doctor's temper, a governess's scorn, more threads. She thought of a nurse who hid a syringe to cover her mistake. "Thank you, Dolly. I'll let you know how Clara is." She left, her mind ticking like a clock. The walk to Willow Grange was short but steep, the manor's grey walls looming through the trees. The young policeman at the gate, Now a familiar face tipped his cap. "Morning, Miss Marple. Mrs. Hawthorne's expecting you." His voice was polite, but his eyes followed her, curious. Miss Marple smiled. St. Mary Mead knew her visits weren't just neighbourly. Inside, the hall was dim, its oak panels swallowing the light. Betsy, the maid, met her, twisting her apron. "Miss Marple, Mrs. Hawthorne's in the parlour," she said, her voice low. "She's got the study key, but she's nervous, says the room feels wrong." Miss Marple patted Betsy's arm. "Thank you, dear. And you, anything new?" Her tone was kind, but her eyes were sharp. Knowing maids saw what others missed. Betsy glanced at the stairs. "Last night, miss, I heard footsteps near the study. Thought it was Mr. Lyle, but when I looked, nobody was there. And I found this." She pulled a tiny scrap of paper from her pocket, crumpled and torn. It had one word, dusk. The writing was neat, like the second note. Miss Marple's breath caught, but her face stayed soft. Another note, or part of one. She thought of a blackmailer's letter, torn to hide its sender. "Very clever, Betsy. May I keep it?" Betsy nodded, and Miss Marple tucked the scrap into her bag, beside the tea tin and Clara's notes. "Keep your eyes open," she said. Betsy scurried off, looking relieved. The parlour was warm, with sunlight streaming through tall windows. Clara sat on a sofa, her black dress stark against her pale face. She held a cup of tea, but it trembled in her hands. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice shaky, "I'm so glad you're here. I can't go in the study alone. It's where he died." Miss Marple sat beside her, her knitting bag at her feet. "You're brave to face it, dear. We'll go together. But first, tell me how's the household, Lily, Mr. Lyle, the others." Her question was gentle, but it probed, seeking cracks. Clara sighed. "Lily's quieter than ever. She won't talk about Reginald. Mr. Lyle's been kind, but I found him in the study yesterday, looking at papers. He said he was organizing, but I don't know. Miss Evelyn's sharp she told me to stop upsetting Lily with my fancies. Dr. Weston came this morning, gave me pills for my nerves, but I didn't take them." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Lyle in the study, Evelyn's scorn, Weston's pilsage, a clue, small but heavy. She thought of a butler caught rifling through a desk, claiming it was duty. "And the new note?" she asked. "Any more since yesterday?" Clara shook her head. "No, but I keep checking my door. I'm scared, Miss Marple. Someone knows something." She pulled out the study key, a heavy iron thing, and handed it over. "Let's go now, before I lose my nerve." They climbed the staircase, passing portraits of grim hawthorns. The study door was at the end of a long hall, its wood dark and solid. Clara unlocked it, and a chill hit them, mixed with that faint, bitter smell of lemons, or something close. Miss Marple's nose twitched, but she said nothing. Stepping inside, the study was large, with a mahogany desk, tall shelves, and a window facing the garden. The air felt heavy, like the room held its breath. The desk was tidy pen, ink, a blotter. All neat, but the chair was slightly askew, as if pushed in a hurry. Shelves held books on business, law, and tucked to one side, that book on poisons still askew. Miss Marple's heart skipped, but her face stayed calm. Clara pointed to the desk. He was here, slumped over. The note was by his hand, like he'd just written it. Her voice trembled, and she stayed near the door, unwilling to step closer. Miss Marple moved slowly, her eyes scanning every inch. The window latch was loose, as she'd noticed before, and a faint scratch marked the sill new, barely visible. A shadow slipping through. She thought of a thief who scratched a window to break in. The rug was smooth, but one corner curled slightly, hiding a faint stained arc, like ink or blood. She knelt, peering closer, but it was dry, old. Not proof, but a hint. She turned to the desk, her fingers brushing the blotter. No smudges, no stray papers, just the pen, capped tight. Too tidy for a man who died in fear. She thought of a staged room, like the time a maid arranged a parlor to hide a fight. The book on poisons caught her eye again. She pulled it down, careful not to disturb its place. Its pages were crisp, but one was dog-eared, marked at a chapter on cyanide. Her pulse quickened. Cyanide matched the almond smell, the village whispers. "Clara," she said, her voice soft. "Did your husband read about poisons? For business, perhaps?" Clara shook her head, her eyes wide. "Never. He read ledgers, contracts. That book, it's not his." She clutched her shawl, stepping back. "It's like someone left it there." Miss Marple nodded, sliding the book back. A planted clue, or a careless mistake. She thought of a poisoner who left a bottle out, thinking it safe. She checked the desk drawers locked, but the top one rattled, as if something small was inside. "Do you have a key for these?" she asked. Clara frowned. "Reginald kept them locked. I don't know where he hid the key." Her voice broke. "This room, it's wrong. I can't stay." Miss Marple squeezed her arm. "Just a moment more, dear. We're almost done." She moved to the shelves, running her fingers along the spines. A thin gap caught her eye, behind a row of books. She reached in and pulled out a single sheet. Folded tight. Her heart raced, but she unfolded it calmly. It read, "The shadow moves at dusk." The handwriting matched the first note, shaky and rushed. Clara gasped. Another one. Where was it? Miss Marple showed her the gap. Hidden, but not well. Someone wanted it found or didn't expect us to look. She thought of a blackmail note tucked behind a clock meant to scare. "May I keep this, too?" Clara nodded, her face ashen. "What does it mean, Miss Marple?" 3 notes, all about dusk. Miss Marple tucked the paper into her bag. "It means someone's telling a story or hiding one. We'll find out." But her mind was racing. 3 notes, 2 hands, 1 word linking them. Dusk, a code, a taunt, or a cry for help. She thought of a coded letter that caught a smuggler in St. Mary Mead. Before they could leave, footsteps sounded and Mr. Lyle appeared. His smile smooth as oil. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I.O., Miss Marple," in the study. His eyes flicked to the desk, then back, a flash of worry crossing his face. Miss Marple smiled sweetly. "Just helping Clara, Mr. Lyle. You've been in here, I hear, organizing papers." Her question was polite, but it stung, testing his nerve. Lyle's smile tightened. "Yes, just sorting bills. Hawthorne left a mess. I was here yesterday after the police left. He adjusted his tie silk to fine again. Nothing unusual." Miss Marple nodded, noting his quick answer. Too quick. She thought of a clerk who lied about papers to cover theft. "You're so helpful," she said, her tone warm but her eyes cold. Lyle bowed and left, his steps a bit too fast. Clara whispered, "He shouldn't be in here." Reginald didn't trust him. Miss Marple's interest sharpened. A manager in a locked room, untrusted by his boss, motive piled on motive. She was about to ask more when the door swung open again, and Inspector Crane strode in, his mustache bristling. "Miss Marple, Mrs. Hawthorne, what's this?" meddling in my investigation. His voice was gruff, his face red. Clara stiffened. It's my house, Inspector. Miss Marple's helping me. Crane's eyes narrowed. Helping, eh? This is a closed case heart attack, nothing more. We checked the pills, the room, everything. Stop stirring trouble. He glared at Miss Marple, who smiled back, unruffled. Of course, Inspector, she said. But this new note found just now might interest you. She held out the paper, watching his face. Crane snatched it, scanning. The words, more nonsense. Hawthorne was paranoid, that's all. I've got real work to do. He stuffed the note in his pocket, ignoring Clara's protest. Stay out of this, Miss Marple. He marched out, leaving a tense silence. Clara's eyes filled with tears. He won't listen, but you see it, don't you? It's not right, miss. Marple squeezed her hand. I see plenty, dear, and I'm not done looking. But her mind was on Crane's haste, his dismissal. She thought of a constable who ignored a clue, letting a killer walk free. The note was gone, but she'd memorized IT another piece in her puzzle. They left the study, Clara locking the door with shaking hands. In the hall, Miss Evelyn passed, her eyes cold. Mrs. Hawthorne, Lily's waiting for her lessons. This fuss isn't helping her. Her voice was sharp, and she barely glanced at Miss Marple before hurrying off. Miss Marple noted the snub. A governess so quick to scold hiding anger, or something more. She thought of a teacher who snapped at children. To cover her guilt. Clara, she said, has Miss Evelyn been herself lately? Clara sighed. She's always sharp, but worse since Reginald died. Says I'm upsetting Lily with my fears. But Lily's scared, too. She won't say why. Miss Marple's mind ticked. A scared girl, a sharp governess, a slick manager, a bitter smell, 3 notes. The study had given her plenty, but the picture wasn't clear. She needed more village talk, household eyes. Maybe Lily's secrets. As she left Willow Grange, Betsy slipped her a quick word. Miss, Dr. Weston's back, in the parlour. Looked upset, dropped his bag. Papers fell out, something about poisons. Betsy's eyes were wide, and she darted away. Miss Marple's heart raced. Poisons again. She thought of a doctor who mixed a fatal dose, claiming it was medicine. She'd watch Weston closer now. The village was waiting, its whispers loud as ever. She stopped at Mrs. Wicks's tea shop on her way home, where the talk was hotter than the tea. Miss Marple, Mrs. Wicks called, setting down a cup. Heard about the stranger again seen near the manor last night, too. And my boy says Lyle's been asking about Hawthorne's safe. Reckon he's after money. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind spinning. A stranger, a safe, a poisoned book, a scratched sill. St. Mary Mead never missed a beat, and neither did she. She thought of a poacher caught by a farmer's gossip. Villagers saw everything. Back at her cottage, she lit the fire and picked up her knitting. The shawl grew soft and pink, but her thoughts were hard, piecing the puzzle. The study's secret cyanide. Notes, stains, scratches pointed to murder, not chance. Lyle's lies, Evelyn's edge, Weston's papers, Lily's fear, Crane's blindness. The shadow moves at dusk. Her needles clicked. A locked study, she murmured. But the keys. In the shadows. Chapter 6. The stepdaughters' secret. The afternoon light filtered through St. Mary Mead's trees, painting the village in soft gold. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cottage, her knitting needles clicking like a steady heartbeat. The pink shawl grew in her lap, but her thoughts were tangled in Willow Grange, where Reginald Hawthorne had died. 3 notes haunted her. Beware the shadow at dusk. The dusk hides the truth, and the shadow moves at dusk. Their words, sharp and strange, pointed to murder, not the heart attack Inspector Crane insisted on. The locked study, the bitter almond. Smell, the book on poison's clues piled up like leaves. But the truth stayed hidden. Miss Marple knew secrets slipped out when people felt safe, like the time a grocer's confession came over tea. Today, she'd talk to Lily, Hawthorne's stepdaughter, whose quiet fear hinted at something deeper. Lily was a puzzle 16, shy, always clutching books or twisting her skirt. Village gossip painted her as scared, sneaking out at night, muttering about escape. Miss Marple had seen that fear before, in a girl who hid her brother's theft. Lily's silence wasn't just grief. It was a wall, and Miss Marple meant to peek over it. She'd visit Willow Grange, using Clara's invitation to check on Lily, but her real aim was the girl's secret. People, she knew, were like her. Knitting one loose stitch could unravel everything. Miss Marple pinned on her hat, grabbed her knitting bag, and stepped into the village. St. Mary Mead buzzed with its usual humcarts rattling, neighbours chatting, dogs barking. The air smelled of fresh hay and Mrs. Price's baking, but gossip hung thicker. As she passed the butcher's, she caught whispers. Lily's been crying again. Lyle's up to no good. Those notes mean trouble. The village was a mirror, reflecting Willow Grange's shadows, and Miss Marple watched every glint. She'd stop at the vicarage first, where Reverend Clement might have seen Lily at church, then head to the manor. The vicarage garden was tidy, with roses in full bloom. Reverend Clement, pruning a bush, looked up with a smile. Miss Marple, out solving mysteries, I wager. His voice was warm, but his eyes were curious. Knowing her visits always meant more. Miss Marple chuckled, settling on a bench. Just checking on Clara, Reverend. Poor Lily must be struggling. Have you seen her lately? Her question was soft, but it fished for truth, like a net cast wide. The vicar nodded, wiping his hands. At church yesterday, though she barely spoke, sat in the back, head down, clutching a hymn book. Clara says she's not sleeping keeps, wandering the manor at night. I tried talking to her, but she just mumbled about her stepfather being too strict. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. Wandering at night, that matched Mrs. Bantry's gardener's tale. She thought of a maid who paced her room, hiding a lover's letters. Strict, you say? Did she mention anything else? Reverend Clement frowned. Not much, but she looked scared, kept glancing at the door, like someone might overhear. Miss Evelyn was with her, hovering like a hawk. Odd that. Evelyn's usually sharp, but she seemed nervous, too. Miss Marple filed it a Wellily's fear, Evelyn's nerves. Another thread. She thought of a governess who watched her charge too closely, hiding her own guilt. Thank you, Reverend. I'll see how Lily's faring. She rose, her mind already on Willow Grange. The manor's grey walls loomed as she approached, its ivy like dark veins. The young policeman at the gate, now used to her, waved her through with a grin. Back again, Miss Marple. Mrs. Hawthorne's in the garden with Lily. His tone was light, but his eyes followed her, sensing her purpose. Inside. The hall was cool and dim, its wood panels gleaming. Betsy, the maid, met her, her apron crumpled from nervous twisting. Miss Marple, she whispered, Mrs. Hawthorne's out back. But Lily's been stranged. A book when I came in her room. Looked like she was writing in it, all sneaky. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. A hidden book that was new. She thought of a diary that caught a thief, its pages full of guilt. "Thank you, Betsy. You're sharp as a tack. Anything else?" Her voice was kind, coaxing more. Betsy glanced at the stairs. "Heard Mr. Lyle on the phone last night, talking low. Said something about the money safe. Sounded shifty." She bit her lip, then scurried off, leaving Miss Marple to ponder. Money, secrets, a book. Willow Grange was a nest of shadows. The garden was bright, with roses and a small fountain gurgling. Clara sat on a bench, her black dress stark against the green. Lily was beside her, head bent over a book. Pirates. As always, Clara looked up, her face pale but relieved. "Miss Marple, you're so good to come." "Lily's been quiet, maybe you can cheer her." Miss Marple smiled, settling beside them. "I'd love to try, dear. Lily, how are you holding up?" Her tone was warm, but her blue eyes were sharp, watching Lily's hands tighten on the book. Lily glanced up, her mousy hair falling over her eyes. "I'm fine, miss." Her voice was a whisper, and her fingers fidgeted like a mouse caught in a trap. Miss Marple saw fear, plain as day, and thought of a village boy who stammered when asked about a stolen pie. "It's hard, losing someone," Miss Marple said gently. "Your stepfather was strict, I hear. Did he worry you much?" Her question was soft, but it probed, seeking a crack in Lily's wall. Lily's eyes flicked to Clara, then down. "He wanted me to be proper. Said I read too much, needed a school far away. I didn't want to go." Her voice shook, and she hugged the book tighter. Clara patted her hand. "Reginald only wanted the best, darling, but I know it upset you." Her voice was kind, but Miss Marple caught a strain guilt, or something else. Miss Marple nodded, her mind ticking. A girl pushed to leave home could resent maybe enough to act. She thought of a daughter who broke her father's clock. In anger, "Books are a comfort," she said. "What's this one about?" "Pirates, you said." Lily flushed, her hands covering the book's title. "Just adventures, ships and treasure." She mumbled, then stood abruptly. "I need water." She hurried toward the house, leaving the book on the bench. Clara sighed. "She's so fragile. I don't know how to help her." Miss Marple's eyes lingered on the book. "Let her rest, dear. May I walk with her? A chat might do her good." Clara nodded, and Miss Marple followed Lily, her steps slow but her mind fast. That book wasn't just stories. Betsy's hint about writing meant more. Inside, Lily stood, by a table, sipping water, her back to the door. Miss Marple approached quietly, her voice soft. "Lily, dear, I didn't mean to pry, but if something's troubling you, I'm here." She kept her distance, like coaxing a shy cat. Lily jumped, spilling a drop of water. "I'm fine, miss, really." But her eyes were wide and her hands shook, betraying her. Miss Marple smiled, sitting at the table. "I love stories too. Once, a girl in St. Mary Mead wrote her worries in a diary. It helped her feel safe. Do you ever write, Lily?" Her question was gentle, but it aimed true, testing the secret. Lily's face paled, and she gripped the glass. "No, I mean, sometimes, just silly things." She looked away, her voice too quick. Miss Marple thought of a shop girl who lied about a letter, her blush giving her away. "There's nothing silly about it," Miss Marple said. "If you ever want to share, I'm a good listener." She paused, then added, "I hear you saw something the night your stepfather died. A shadow, maybe. It's all right to tell." Lily froze, her glass clattering to the table. I didn't see anything. I was in my room. Her voice cracked, and her eyes darted to the door, like she expected someone to burst in. Please, don't ask me. She ran from the room, leaving Miss Marple alone. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her face stayed calm. Lily knew something her fear was a neon sign, a shadow at dusk, tied to the notes. She thought of a boy who saw a crime but stayed silent, scared of his father. Lily's secret was close, and Miss Marple would find it. She returned to the garden, where Clara was staring at the fountain. Lily's upset, Miss Marple said gently. She mentioned a shadow that night. Did she tell you anything? Clara's eyes widened. A shadow? No, she said she was reading. But she's been so jumpy, keeps locking her door at night. Her voice trembled, and she clutched her shawl. Miss Marple nodded, filing it away. A locked door meant fear of someone in the house. She thought of a wife who bolted her room, hiding from her husband's temper. I'll talk to her again, dear. She needs time. But her mind was on that book. Left on the bench, Clara agreed, and Miss Marple picked up the book as they walked back. It was old, its cover worn, titled Tales of the High Seas. She flipped it open, casual-like, and a loose page slipped out a child's drawing of a window with a dark figure outside, labeled Dusk. The handwriting was Lily's, small and neat. Miss Marple's pulse quickened, but she tucked the page back. Unnoticed by Clara, a drawing of a shadow-proof Lily saw something, back in the parlour. They found Mr. Lyle sorting papers with his usual slick smile. Mrs. Hawthorne, I've checked the accounts. Everything's in order. He saw Miss Marple and bowed. Miss Marple, always a pleasure, helping with Lily. His tone was warm, but his eyes were wary, noting the book in her hand. Miss Marple smiled. Just chatting, Mr. Lyle. You're busy, I see. Found anything interesting in those papers? Her question was polite, but it stung, watching his reaction. Lyle's smile faltered. Just bills, nothing more. Hawthorne was particular about money. He adjusted his cuffling scold, too rich for his role. I was in my office all evening after his death. Routine work. Miss Marple nodded, but her mind hummed. Always in his office, yet Betsy heard him on the phone, talking of money. She thought of a clerk who hid stolen cash in his ledger. You're a great help, she said, her tone sweet but her eyes sharp. Lyle left, his steps quick. Clara sank onto the sofa. Reginald was going to fire him, you know, said Lyle with stealing. I don't trust him, Miss Marple. Miss Marple's interest sharpened. Theft was a motive, clear as glass. She was about to ask more when Miss Evelyn strode in, her face tight. Mrs. Hawthorne, Lily's late for her lessons. This visiting isn't helping. Her eyes flicked to Miss Marple, cold as ice. Miss Marple smiled, unruffled. I'm sorry, Miss Evelyn. I was just with Lily. She's fond of her books, isn't she? Her question was light, but it probed, testing Evelyn's temper. Evelyn's lips thinned, too fond. She wastes time dreaming when she should study. I was in the schoolroom that night, preparing lessons, not that it's your business. Her voice was sharp, and she turned to Clara. I'll fetch Lily. She left, her heels clicking like gunfire. Miss Marple noted the defensiveness. In the schoolroom, yet Betsy saw her with a key. Lies piled up. She thought of a nanny who lied about her evening, hiding a theft. Clara, she said, has Lily been close to Miss Evelyn lately? Clara shook her head. Not really. Evelyn's strict Lily's scared of her. Reginald liked that, said it built character. But Lily's been avoiding her since it happened. Miss Marple's mind ticked. A scared girl, a strict governess tension that could snap. She thought of a pupil who rebelled against a harsh teacher, breaking rules to feel free. "I'll call again tomorrow," she said. "Lily might open up with time." Clara nodded, her eyes tired. "Thank you, Miss Marple. You're the only one who listens." As Miss Marple left, she passed Dr. Weston in the hall, his doctor's bag swinging. He looked startled, his face pale. "Miss Marple, here again." His voice was polite, but his hands fumbled with the bag. A paper slipping out a medical note, quickly snatched back. Miss Marple smiled. "Just visiting, doctor. You look busy, checking on Clara." Her question was kind, but it watched, catching. His nerves, Weston nodded. "Too fast." "Yes, her nerves are bad. I was here that night. You checked Hawthorne's heart, left by 9. Routine." His eyes darted, and he hurried off, leaving Miss Marple to ponder. 9. Yet Mrs. Brother saw him later. Another lie. Outside, the village was settling into evening, the sky pink and soft. Miss Marple stopped at Mrs. Price's shop, where the talk was thick. Miss Marple, Mrs. Price called, weighing apples. "Heard about Lily. My nephew says she was in the garden last night, digging near the roses. Looked like she was hiding something." Miss Marple's heart skipped. Digging, the fit, the sneaking, the book, the drawing. She thought of a boy who buried stolen coins, caught by a neighbor. "Interesting," she said. "And the stranger, any more sightings?" Mrs. Price nodded. "Aye, near the manor again. Rough fellow, limping. Folk reckon he's trouble." She handed Miss Marple a bag of apples, grinning. "You'll catch the killer, miss. Bet on it." Miss Marple smiled, but her mind was racing. A stranger, Lily's digging, Lyle's money, Evelyn's lies, Weston's nerves. St. Mary Mead saw everything, and she saw more. Back at her cottage, she lit the fire and picked up her knitting. The shore grew pink and warm, but her thoughts were cold, slicing through the clues. The drawing of a shadow, the word dusk, Lily's fear, the study's secrets. The shadow moves at dusk. Her needles clicked. "A stepdaughter's secret," she murmured, "and it's starting to show." Chapter 7. A red herring emerges. The evening sky over St. Mary Mead glowed pink, softening the village's neat cottages and winding lanes. Miss Jane Marple sat by her cottage fire, her knitting needles clicking like a quiet drum. The pink shawl grew in her lap, but her thoughts were knotted around Willow Grange, where Reginald Hawthorne had died. 3 cryptic notes: "Beware the shadow at dusk. The dusk hides the truth." And the shadow moves at dusk danced in her mind, sharp and troubling. The locked study, the almond-like smell, Lily's fearful drawing of a shadow, clues stacked like firewood, but the spark of truth was still missing. Miss Marple knew secrets slipped out when people let their guard down, like the time a baker's boast revealed a stolen ring. Today, she'd head to the village square, where gossip burned hotter than her hearth, to catch the latest talk about Hawthorne's death. St. Mary Mead was a chatterbox, its whispers weaving a net around every scandal. Miss Marple had heard whispers of a stranger, a limping man seen near the manor, and of Lily's nighttime digging, Lyle's flashy clothes, and Dr. Weston's nervous fumble with poison papers. Each hint was a thread, and she meant to pull them tighter. But as she pinned on her hat and stepped outside, the air felt different, charged, like before a storm. The village was buzzing with something new, and Miss Marple's sharp blue eyes missed nothing as she walked toward Mrs. Wicks's tea shop. The shop was packed, the air thick with the scent of scones and tea. Mrs. Wicks spotted Miss Marple and waved her to a small table by the window. "Miss Belle, you won't believe it, they've caught the killer." Her voice carried and heads turned, spoons clinking against cups. Miss Marple's heart skipped, but her face stayed calm as she settled into the chair. "Caught someone? Who, Mrs. Wicks?" Her tone was gentle, but her question was a hook, fishing for the truth behind the village's excitement. Mrs. Wicks leaned close, her eyes wide. "Tom Brady, that vagrant who sleeps in the woods. Police nabbed him this morning near Willow Grange, with Hawthorne's watch in his pocket. Inspector Crane says he's the one snuck in poisoned Hawthorne, stole the watch. The whole village is talking." Miss Marple's needles paused in her bag, her mind racing. Tom Brady, rough, limping man, often seen begging by the church. The stranger from the gossip. She thought of a peddler blamed for a theft years ago, his bag stuffed with planted goods. "That's quite a story," she said. "What else?" "Do they say?" Mrs. Wicks poured tea, her voice low. "Crane found Brady by the manor gate, looking shifty. The watch was engraved Hawthorne's initials, no mistake. Clara's in a state, says it proves murder. But my nephew, who sweeps for the police, heard Crane say, Brady's a thief, not a killer. Poison's too clever for him." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her thoughts spinning. A watch was solid evidence, but too neat, like a bow on a gift. She thought of a stolen necklace found in a maid's room, placed to frame her. And the household, any word from Willow Grange? Mrs. Wicks nodded. "Betsy says Clara's locked herself in her room, crying. Lily's been hiding in the library, won't talk. Mr. Lyle's strutting about, saying he knew Brady was trouble. Miss Evelyn told the milkman Brady scared Lily, lurking by the garden. Dr. Weston's quiet, but my cousin saw him burn papers in his garden yesterday, looked guilty." Miss Marple filed it away. Clara's tears, Lily's silence, Lyle's confidence, Evelyn's claim, Weston's fire, each a clue or a mask. She thought of a farmer who burned letters to hide his debts. "Thank you, Mrs. Wicks. I'll visit Clarapore. Thing needs a friend." She left a coin and stepped out. The village square alive with talk. The newsstand by the post office was crowded, with Miss Hartnell, the postmistress, holding court. Miss Marple called, her bony face alight. "Heard about Brady. Caught red-handed. I always said he was no good sneaking about, scaring folk." Miss Marple smiled, picking up a newspaper. "It sounds serious, Miss Hartnell. What's the village saying?" Her question was polite, but it dug, seeking the cracks in the story. Miss Hartnell puffed up. "Tom Brady's a rogue. My postman saw him near Willow Grange that night, limping by the hedge. And Clara got another note yesterday slipped under the gate, same writing as the others. Said the dusk will fall. Police think Brady wrote it, trying to scare her." Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed soft. A fourth note that didn't fit a vagrant's rough hands. She thought of a blackmailer whose notes were too clever for his ragged coat. Another note that's odd. Did anyone see Brady with paper or pen? Miss Hartnell frowned. "Well, no, but he's sly. And that watch, how else did he get it?" Though she lowered her voice. "My Tom says Lyle was quick to point the finger, almost too quick." Miss Marple nodded, her mind ticking. Lyle's eagerness was a red flag, like a shopkeeper who blamed a boy too fast for a broken window. "Thank you, Miss Hartnell. I'll see how Clara's holding up. She tucked the paper under her arm and walked on, the villagers' whispers trailing her like smoke. At the church, Mrs. Price was gossiping with the baker. "Miss Marple," she called, waving her broom. "Brady's locked up, but I don't buy it. My nephew says the watch was in his coat, not his hand like someone slipped it there. And Lily was seen near the gate that night, looking scared." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Lily again, always scared, always near the edges of trouble. She thought of a girl who dropped a stolen pin, framed by her own nerves. "That's curious," she said. "Any more about the household?" Mrs. Price nodded. "Aye, Lyle's been asking about Hawthorns. Will too nosy if you ask me. Evelyn's been snapping at everyone. Says Brady's arrest proves she was right about strangers. Weston's been at the manor daily, checking Clara, but he's pale as a ghost." Miss Marple thanked her and headed to Willow Grange, her thoughts a tangle. Brady's arrest was loud, but it rang hollow. A watch and a note didn't make a killer, especially one as clumsy as Brady. The real shadow was in the manor, and she'd find it. The manor's stone walls loomed, its windows dark despite the sun. The policeman at the gate, now chatty, let her through. "Miss Marple, you heard. Brady's nabbed case, closed." His grin was smug, but Miss Marple only smiled, noting his certainty. Blind faith in police work was a trap. She'd seen it before. When a constable jailed the wrong man for a fire. Inside, Betsy met her eyes wide. "Miss Marple, Mrs. Hawthorn's in the parlour, but she's a wreck. Brady's arrest scared her worse. And I saw something Miss Evelyn burning a letter in the garden last night. Looked like she didn't want it found." Miss Marple's heart raced, but her voice was kind. "Thank you, Betsy. You're sharp. Keep watching." A burned letter that matched Weston's papers, Lyle's secrets. She thought of a cook who burned a recipe to hide poison. Betsy led her to the parlour, where Clara sat, her face pale as chalk. "Miss Marple," Clara whispered, clutching a handkerchief. "They've caught him, Tom Brady. But I'm more scared now. That new note, the dusk will fall, it came after he was arrested. It's not him, is it?" Her voice shook, and her hands twisted the cloth. Miss Marple sat beside her, her knitting bag at her feet. "It's troubling, dear. Tell me about Brady. Did you know him?" Her question was gentle, but it probed, seeking the truth behind. "The vagrant's roll." Clara shook her head. "Only by sight. He begged near the village, never bothered us. But Reginald's watch, how did he get it? And the note? It's the same writing as the first, but neater, like someone's mocking me." She pulled out the new note, its words stark, "The dusk will fall." Miss Marple studied it, her fingers tracing the ink. The handwriting was indeed neater, but the word dusk tied it to the others. A copycat, or the same hand, steadier now. She thought of a forger who practiced his craft, caught by a single letter. "This is important, Clara. May I hold on to it?" Clara nodded, and Miss Marple tucked it with the others, her mind racing. For notes, one killer, but Brady didn't fit. The door opened, and Mr. Lyle strode in, his smile too bright. "Mrs. Hawthorn, the police have their man. Good news, eh? Brady's a rogue, I always said." He saw Miss Marple and bowed. "Miss Marple, here to celebrate justice." Miss Marple smiled, noting his gold cufflinks. "Justice is tricky, Mr. Lyle. You seem sure of Brady. Did you know him?" Her question was polite, but it stung, watching his eyes. Lyle's smile tightened. "Seen him skulking about. Shifty type. I was in my office that night, As I said, didn't see him, but I'm not surprised he's guilty. His voice was smooth, but his fingers tugged his sleeve. A nervous tick. Miss Marple nodded, her mind humming. Always in his office, yet quick to blame Brady. She thought of a clerk who pointed fingers to hide his own theft. "You're a great help," she said, her tone sweet but her eyes cold. Lyle left, his steps brisk. Clara whispered, "He's too eager." Reginald was going to sack him, said he stole thousands. Why is he so calm now? Miss Marple's interest sharpened. A thief with motive, framing a vagrant. She was about to ask more when Lily slipped in, her face pale, her pirate book clutched tight. "Mother," she said softly, "is it true? They caught someone." Clara pulled her close. "Yes, darling, but don't worry. Miss Marple's here." Lily glanced at Miss Marple, her eyes wide with fear, and sat, hugging the book like a shield. Miss Marple smiled gently. "Lily, you must be relieved. Did you ever see this Brady near the manor?" Her question was kind, but it probed, seeking the shadow in Lily's drawing. Lily shook her head, too fast. "No, never. I was in my room that night, reading." Her voice trembled, and her fingers dug into the book, betraying her nerves. Miss Marple thought of a girl who lied about a fire, her hands shaking just the same. "It's all right, dear," Miss Marple said. "But if you saw anything, a shadow, maybe it could help." She watched Lily's face, hoping for a crack. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't see anything. Please, leave me alone." She ran from the room, leaving the book behind. Miss Marple picked it up, casual-like, and flipped it open. Another drawing fell out, a rough sketch of a man with a limp, labeled Danger. Lily's hand, no doubt, but was it Brady or someone else? Clara gasped. "What's that?" "Lily's drawing." Miss Marple tucked the paper away, her heart racing. "Just a child's sketch, dear. She's scared, that's all." But her mind was on that figure Brady, or a clue to the real shadow. She thought of a boy's doodle that led to a smuggler's hideout. The door swung open, and Miss Evelyn marched in, her face tight. "Mrs. Hawthorne, Lily's missed her lessons again. This chaos isn't helping." Her eyes flicked to Miss Marple, cold as stone. "You're stirring things up, aren't you?" Miss Marple smiled, unruffled. "Just visiting, Miss Evelyn. I hear you saw Brady near the garden. Scary, I'm sure." Her question was light, but it tested, watching Evelyn's reaction. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Yes, lurking by the roses. I told Lily to stay away. I was in the schoolroom that night. Working late, didn't see him then." Her voice was sharp, and she turned to Clara. "I'll find Lily." She left, her heels snapping. Miss Marple noted that Lebetsy saw her with a key, not in the schoolroom. A governess hiding something, quick to back Brady's guilt. She thought of a teacher who blamed a pupil to cover her own fault. "Clara," she said, "has Evelyn been close to Lily since the arrest?" Clara sighed. "No, Lily avoids her. Evelyn's been colder, says I'm imagining things with the notes. But that new one, it's real." Miss Marple nodded, her mind ticking. A governess dismissing clues, a girl drawing danger. The pieces were shifting. She was about to ask more when Dr. Weston entered, his face drawn, his bag clutched tight. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I've brought your medicine." He saw Miss Marple and stiffened. Miss Marple still here. Miss Marple smiled. "Just helping, doctor. Brady's arrest must ease your mind. You were here that night, weren't you?" Her question was kind, but it probed, catching his flinch. Weston nodded, his voice tight. Yes, checked Hawthorne's heart, left by 9. Brady's a bad sort, good riddance. His fingers fumbled the bag, and a vial rolled out empty, labeled sedative. He grabbed it, his face red. Clumsy of me. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, but she smiled. We all fumble, Doctor, but her mind was on that vile sedatives could mask poison if mixed right. She thought of a chemist who swapped bottles, caught by a sharp nurse. Weston left, his steps hurried. Clara rubbed her temples. Everyone so quick to blame Brady, but the note. It's not him, I feel it. Miss Marple squeezed her hand. Trust your instincts, dear. I'll keep looking. But her thoughts were on Brady's watch, too neatly found, and Lily's drawing, too sharp for chance. A red herring, but the real fish was in Willow Grange. She left the manor, stopping at Mrs. Wicks's tea shop for one last listen. The talk was all Brady's limp, his coat, his guilty look. But Mrs. Wicks whispered, my boy says the police missed something in the studio. Tiny key under the rug. Crane ignored it, but it's there. Miss Marple's heart raced. A key that could unlock the desk, or the truth. She thought of a hidden key that caught a forger in St. Mary Mead. Thank you, Mrs. Wicks, she said, her mind already planning her next visit. Back at her cottage, she lit the fire and picked up her knitting. The shawl grew pink and soft, but her thoughts were hard, slicing through the clues. Brady's watch, Lily's drawing, Evelyn's letter, Weston's vial, Lyle's smile, a hidden key. The dusk will fall. Her needles clicked. A red herring, she murmured, but the shadows still swimming. Chapter 8. The Doctor's Dilemma. The morning mist hung low over St. Mary Mead, wrapping the village in a soft, grey blanket. Miss Jane Marple stood at her cottage door, her knitting bag tucked under her arm, her sharp blue eyes scanning the quiet lanes. The pink shawl she'd been knitting lay inside, but her thoughts were on Willow Grange, where Reginald Hawthorne's death lingered like a bad dream. For cryptic notes, beware the shadow at dusk. The dusk hides the truth, the shadow moves. At dusk, and the dusk will fall pricked her mind like thorns. The locked study, the almond-like smell, Lily's fearful drawing. And now Tom Brady's arrest as a thief turned killer. It was a tangled web, but Miss Marple knew truth hidden. The knots. She'd learned that years ago, when a shopkeeper's lie unraveled over a missing coin. Today, she'd focus on Dr. Weston, whose jumpy hands and shaky alibi hinted at a secret bigger than medicine. Dr. Weston was a puzzle-com on the surface, but his dropped vial, burned papers, and late-night presence at the manor didn't add up. Village gossip whispered of his nerves, his arguments with Hawthorne over pills, and a parcel he'd mailed in a hurry. Miss Marple thought of a chemist in St. Mary Mead who fumbled bottles to hide a poison plot. Weston's claim of leaving Willow. Grange by 9 clashed with Mrs. Wicks's brother, seeing him after small lies, but they grew heavy. She'd visit the manor, using Clara's trust to question Weston, and stop by the village first to catch the latest talk. St. Mary Mead's chatter was a goldmine, and Miss Marple knew how to dig. She stepped into the village, her black shoes tapping the path. The air smelled of damp grass and fresh bread, but gossip buzzed louder. The square was alive with neighbours' farmers haggling, maids whispering, children chasing a ball. Miss Marple headed for Mrs. Price's shop, where the shopkeeper's broom swept as fast as her tongue. Miss Marple, Mrs. Price called, leaning on her broom. You're after the Brady news, I bet. Whole village says he's guilty, but I'm not so sure. My nephew heard Crane muttering reckons, Brady's too dim for poison. Her eyes gleamed, hungry for Miss Marple's take. Miss Marple smiled, picking up a loaf. It's a strange case, Mrs. Price. Brady's watch is odd, don't you think? Almost too easy. What's the talk about Dr. Weston? Her question was soft, but it aimed true, fishing for gold. Mrs. Price nodded, her voice low. Plenty. My cousin's girl works at his surgery, says Weston's been a mess, misplacing files, snapping at patients. Yesterday he got a letter, read it, and turned white. Burned it right after. And the milkman saw him at Willow Grange, late, night before last, carrying a case, not his usual bag. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. Burned. Letters, late visits, a different case threads piling up. She thought of a doctor who burned a prescription to hide a mistake. Curious, she said, and the household, Clara, Lily, the others. Mrs. Price grinned. Clara's locked. Her doors, scared of more notes. Lily's been in the attic, hiding, says my nephew. Lyle's too smug, flashing a new watch wears he'd get the money. Evelyn's been at the chemist, asking about sleeping powders. Reckon she's up to something. Miss Marple paid for the loaf, her mind racing. Lily in the attic, Lyle's. Wealth, Evelyn's powders, edge, a clue or a trap. She thought of a maid who hid in a loft, scared of her master's wrath. Thank you, Mrs. Price. I'll check on Clara, poor thing's frightened. She left, the villagers' whispers trailing. Her next stop was the post office, where Miss Hartnell sorted letters with a hawk's eye. Miss Marple, she barked. Brady's guilty, no doubt, but you're sniffing for more, aren't you? What's it this time? Her tone was sharp, but her eyes were fond. Miss Marple smiled, buying a stamp. Just curious, Miss Hartnell. Brady's watch is puzzling, but what about Dr. Weston? Any mail for him lately? Her question was polite, but it dug, seeking the letter Mrs. Price mentioned. Miss Hartnell puffed up. Funny you ask. Weston got a plain envelope 2 days ago, no name, just his address. Looked nervous when he picked it up. And my postman says he's been mailing packages, daily small ones, no labels. Odd for a doctor, don't you think? Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Anonymous letters, secret packages. Weston was hiding something. She thought of a postman who caught a smuggler by his parcels. Very odd, she said. Any talk about the manor? Miss Hartnell nodded. Aye, Clara's been asking the vicar about poison, scared. Her pills are tampered. Lily's been seen with a notebook, scribbling like mad. Lyle's been at the bank, asking about Hawthorne's accounts. Evelyn's been in the garden again, digging near the Rosa Sames spot. Lily was Miss Marple thanked her and stepped out, her thoughts spinning. Poison fears, a notebook, bank visits, digging Willow Grange was a storm of secrets. She thought of a gardener who dug up stolen cash, caught by a neighbour's eye. The manor was calling, and Dr. Weston was her target. Willow Grange's grey. Walls loomed as she approached, its ivy curling like dark fingers. The policeman at the gate, now chatty, waved her through. Miss Marple, Brady's locked-up case, solved. His grin was wide, but Miss Marple only smiled, noting his blind trust in Crane. She'd seen it before, when a constable jailed a beggar for a crime he didn't commit. Inside, Betsy met her, her apron twisted tight. Miss Marple, Mrs. Hawthorne's. In the library with Dr. Weston. He's been here all morning, looking grim. And I found this near the study. She handed over a tiny vial, empty, with a faint almond smell. Thought you'd want it. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her voice was kind. You're a gem, Betsy. Keep this quiet. She tucked the vial into her bag, beside the notes and Lily's drawing. Cyanide, or something close, she thought. Of a nurse who found a bottle that cracked a murder case. Anything else, dear? Betsy whispered, heard Weston talking to Lyle last night, in the hall. Sounded like an argument, something about the pills. They stopped when they saw me. She scurried off, leaving Miss Marple to ponder. An argument over pills. That was no coincidence. The library was grand, with tall shelves and a cold hearth. Clara sat in an armchair, her face pale, while Dr. Weston stood nearby, his bag open. He looked up, startled, as Miss Marple entered. "Miss Marple, here again." His voice was polite, but his hands fumbled a syringe, nearly dropping it. Miss Marple smiled, settling beside Clara. "Just visiting, Doctor. Clara's been through so much. You're checking her health, I see." Her question was warm, but it watched, catching his twitch. Weston nodded, his face tight. "Yes, her nerves are frayed. This Brady business hasn't helped. I was here that night. Checked Hawthorne's heart, gave him his pills, left by 9. Nothing unusual." His words were steady, but his fingers tapped the bag, betraying him. Clara clutched her shawl. "Dr. Weston's been kind, but I'm scared, Miss Marple. Those notes another came this morning, under my window." She pulled out a paper, its words stark. "Dusk brings the end." The handwriting was neat, like the second and fourth notes. But the word dusk tied it to all. Miss Marple's breath caught, but her face stayed soft. A fifth note, after Brady's arrest, that buried the vagrant's guilt. She thought of a blackmailer who kept writing, even after a false arrest. "This is serious, Clara. May I keep it?" Clara nodded, and Miss Marple tucked it away, her mind racing. "Dr. Weston, did Hawthorne ever mention these notes to you?" Weston's eyes flicked to the paper, then away. "No, but he was worried, thought someone was tampering with his medicine. I checked his pills myself, all fine. He was paranoid, that's all." His voice was firm, but his hands shook, and Miss Marple noted it. She thought of a doctor who swore a dose was safe, caught by a patient's diary. Clara's voice trembled. "He didn't trust you, doctor. Said his pills tasted odd the last week. I told Inspector Crane, but he won't listen." Weston's face reddened. "Nonsense. I've been his physician for years. I left him healthy that night heart trouble caught up, nothing more." He snapped his bag shut, his movements jerky. "I have patience, Mrs. Hawthorne. Take your medicine." He strode out, leaving a tense silence. Miss Marple squeezed Clara's hand. "Don't worry, dear. We'll sort this out. Has anyone else seen this new note?" Her question was gentle, but it probed, seeking who knew. Clara shook her head. "Just you and Lily." I showed her, hoping she'd talk. She just cried and ran to her room. "She's so scared, Miss Marple." Miss Marple's mind ticked. Lily again, always running, always scared. She thought of a girl who fled a room, hiding her father's crime. "I'll check on her, Clara. And the others, Lyle, Evelyn." Clara sighed. "Lyle's been in the study, looking at papers again. Says it's for the estate, but I don't trust him. Evelyn's been sharp, told me to stop upsetting Lily. She's in the garden now, digging again." Miss Marple nodded, filing it away. Lyle's snooping, Evelyn's digging more shadows. She was about to ask more when Mr. Lyle entered, his smile as slick as ever. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I've sorted the taxis, nothing to worry about." He saw Miss Marple and bowed. Miss Marple, still comforting. Brady's arrest must be a relief. Miss Marple smiled, noting his new silk scarf. It's a start, Mr. Lyle. You're sure Brady's guilty? You were in your office that night, weren't you? Her question was polite, but it stung, watching. His eyes, Lyle's smile faltered. Yes, working late, as always. Brady's a thief watch proves it. I saw him once, near the gate, looking sneaky. His voice was smooth, but his fingers tugged his scarf. A nervous tick. Miss Marple nodded, her mind humming. Always in his office, yet quick to spot Brady, she thought of a clerk who blamed a beggar to hide his own theft. You're vigilant, she said, her tone sweet but her eyes sharp. Lyle left, his steps a touch too fast, Clara whispered. He's too calm. Reginald was going to ruin him, said he'd prove the theft. Wise, he's smiling. Miss Marple's interest sharpened. A thief with a grudge, framing Brady. She was about to reply when Miss Evelyn stormed in, her face tight. Mrs. Hawthorne, Lily's hiding again. This meddling isn't helping. Her eyes flicked to Miss Marple, cold as frost. You're stirring trouble. Miss Marple smiled. Unruffled, just helping, Miss Evelyn. I hear you're gardening, digging near the roses. Found anything interesting? Her question was light, but it probed, catching Evelyn's flinch. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Just weeding. I was in the schoolroom that night, preparing lessons. Not that it's your business. Her voice was sharp, and she turned to Clara. I'll fetch Lily. She left, her heels snapping like twigs. Miss Marple noted the Lebetsi. Saw her with a key, not in the schoolroom. A governess hiding her tracks, digging for what? She thought of a nanny who buried stolen jewels, caught by a maid. Clara, she said, has Evelyn been acting strange? Clara nodded. She's colder, snaps at everyone. Says I'm imagining the notes, but Lily's scared of her. I don't know why. Miss Marple's mind ticked. A scared girl, a sharp governess tension that could break. She was about to ask more when Lily slipped in, her pirate book clutched tight, her eyes red. Mother, she whispered, can I stay here? Clara pulled her close. Of course, darling. Miss Marple's kind, she's helping us. Lily glanced at Miss Marple, her hands trembling, and sat, hugging the book. Miss Marple smiled gently. Lily, I found your drawing very clever. Did you see that man by the window? It's safe to tell. Her question was soft, but it aimed for the crack in Lily's fear. Lily's face paled, and she shook her head. I didn't see anyone, just made it up. Her voice cracked, and her fingers dug into the book, betraying her lie. Miss Marple thought of a boy who denied seeing a theft, his eyes giving him away. It's all right, dear, Miss Marple said. But if you remember anything as shadow, maybe I'm here. Lily nodded, but her eyes stayed down, locked in fear. Clara sighed. She's been like this since the arrest. Thinks it's not over. Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts on Lily's. Drawing, the notes, Weston's nerves. Brady was a distraction. The real shadow was here. She left the library, promising to return, and stopped by Mrs. Wicks's tea shop on her way home. The talk was all Brady, but Mrs. Wicks whispered, My boy says Weston dropped a key at the Manor Small, like for a drawer. Crane ignored it, but it's still there, under a table. Miss Marple's heart raced. Another key, like the one under the rug, that could unlock the desk or Weston's secret. She thought of a hidden key that caught a forger in St. Mary Mead. Thank you, Mrs. Wicks, she said, her mind planning her next move. Back at her cottage, she lit the fire and picked up her knitting. The shawl grew pink and warm, but her thoughts were cold, slicing through the clues. Weston's lies, Lily's drawing, Lyle's scarf, Evelyn's digging, Brady's watch, a dropped key. Dusk brings the end, her needles clicked. A doctor's dilemma, she murmured, and it's starting to break. Chapter 9. The manager's motive. The morning sun spilled over St. Mary Mead, gilding the villages, cottages, and waking the sparrows in the hedges. Miss Jane Marple stood at her cottage window, her knitting bag ready, her sharp blue eyes tracing the quiet lanes. The pink shawl she'd been knitting waited by the fire, but her thoughts were locked on Willow Grange, where Reginald Hawthorne's death cast a long shadow. 5 cryptic notes: beware the shadow at dusk. The dusk hides the truth, the shadow moves at dusk. The dusk will fall, and dusk brings the end. Pricked her mind like needles. The locked study, the almond-like smell, Lily's fearful drawings, Dr. Weston's fumbled vial, and Tom Brady's convenient arrest, all pieces of a puzzle, but the picture was blurry. Miss Marple knew secrets hid in plain sight, like the time a grocer's smile hid a stolen watch. Today, she'd zero in on Mr. Lyle, the estate manager, whose silk ties and smug grin hinted at a motive darker than his ledgers. Lyle was a slick figure, charming, but too flashy for a manager's pay. Village gossip buzzed about his new boots, gold cufflinks, and questions about Hawthorne's will. Clara said Hawthorne planned to fire him for stealing, and Betsy overheard him whispering about safe money. Miss Marple thought of a clerk in St. Mary Mead who wore stolen rings, caught by a neighbour's eye. Lyle's quick finger-pointing at Brady felt too neat, like a stage trick. She'd visit Willow Grange, using Clara's trust to probe Lyle, and stop by the village to sift through gossip. St. Mary Mead's chatter was a map, and Miss Marple knew every path. She stepped out, her black shoes crunching the gravel. The air smelled of fresh dew and Mrs. Wicks's baking, but whispers hung heavier. The village square hummed farmers bartering, maids giggling, dogs yapping. Miss Marple headed for the tea shop, where Mrs. Wicks's scones came with a side of news. Miss Marple, Mrs. Wicks called, waving her to a corner table. "You're after Brady's arrest, I bet, but folks say it's not him." "My boy heard Crane grumbling, says the watch was planted, but he's sticking with Brady to look tough." Her eyes sparkled, eager for Miss Marple's take. Miss Marple smiled, pouring tea. "It's a muddle, Mrs. Wicks. Brady's watch is too tidy. What's the talk about Mr. Lyle?" Her question was gentle, but it dug. Seeking the gold in the village's chatter, Mrs. Wicks leaned close, her voice low. "Plenty. My cousin's lad delivers to the manor, says Lyle's got a new car, parked out back. How's he afford that? And the baker saw him at the bank, asking about Hawthorne's safe. Reckon he's after more than wages. Oh, and Clara's been crying, says Lyle's, pushing her to sign papers." Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. A car, a safe pressure on Clara threads, weaving tight. She thought of a butler who bought a horse, funded by his master's cash. "Curious," she said, "and the others?" "Lily, Dr. Weston, Miss Evelyn." Mrs. Wicks nodded. "Lily's been in the attic again, hiding with her books." "Weston's been at the chemist, buying bottles, looked shifty." "Evelyn's been snapping at the grocer's boy, says he saw her in the garden too late. Reckon she's hiding something." Miss Marple sipped her tea, filing it away. Lily's hiding, Weston's bottles, Evelyn's night, small clues, or traps. She thought of a maid who snapped at a delivery boy to cover her theft. "Thank you, Mrs. Wicks. I'll check on Clarushi's frightened." She left a coin and stepped out, the village's buzz trailing her. Her next stop was the post office, where Miss Hartnell sorted mail with a hawk's glare. "Miss Marple," she barked. "Brady's a red herring, isn't he? You're after the real killer. What's it now?" Her tone was sharp, but her eyes were fond. Miss Marple smiled, buying a postcard. "Just curious, Miss Hartnell. Brady's arrest is odd, but what about Mr. Lyle? Any mail for him?" Her question was polite, but it probed, chasing the money trail. Miss Hartnell puffed up. "Funny you ask. Lyle's been getting letters plain envelopes, no return address. He grabs them quick, looks nervous, and my postman says he mailed a package yesterday heavy, like coins or metal." "Strange for a manager, eh?" Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Secret letters, a heavy package. Lyle was deeper in this than he let on. She thought of a smuggler caught by his mail, his parcels full of stolen goods. "Very strange," she said. "Any talk about Willow Grange?" Miss Hartnell nodded. "Aye, Clara's been asking about locks once, her doors changed. Lily's been seen with a knife, cutting paper in the library scared the maid. Weston's been at the manor late, carrying a case, not his bag. Evelyn's been digging again, near the fountain this time." Miss Marple thanked her and left, her thoughts spinning. New locks, a knife, late visits, more digging. Willow Grange was a hive of secrets. She thought of a gardener who dug up stolen silver, caught by a servant's glance. The manor was her next stop, and Lyle her target. Willow Grange's stone walls loomed, its ivy curling like dark veins. The policeman at the gate, now a friend, waved her through. Miss Marple still checking on Mrs. Hawthorne. "Brady's locked up, but folks say it's not over." His grin was easy, but Miss Marple noted his Doubt Village gossip was cracking Crane's case. Inside, Betsy met her, her apron twisted tight. "Miss Marple, Mrs. Hawthorne's in the drawing room with Mr. Lyle. He's been pushing papers at her. Looks angry. And I saw something in Lyle's office, a ledger with red ink hidden under a book." Her eyes were wide, scared to say more. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her voice was kind. "You're sharp, Betsy. Keep that quiet. Anything else?" Her question was soft, coaxing more. Betsy whispered, "Heard Lyle on the phone this morning. Talking about the deal. Said nobody'll find it. Sounded sneaky." She scurried off, leaving Miss Marple to ponder. A hidden ledger, a secret deal. Lyle was neck-deep in trouble. She thought of a clerk who hid accounts to cover his theft. The drawing room was grand, with heavy curtains and a portrait of Hawthorne glaring down. Clara sat on a sofa, her face pale, while Lyle stood, holding a stack of papers. His smile was slick, but his eyes were hard as he saw Miss Marple. "Miss Marple, a pleasure. I'm just helping Mrs. Hawthorne with the estate." His voice was smooth, but his fingers gripped the papers tight. Miss Marple smiled, settling beside Clara. "You're so helpful, Mr. Lyle. It must be hard, managing after such a loss. Were you close to Mr. Hawthorne?" Her question was warm, but it stung, watching his reaction. Lyle's smile twitched. "Not close, no. He was particular, liked control. I was in my office that night, balancing books, didn't hear a thing." His voice was steady, but his cuffling scold, too ridge-glinted, catching her eye. Miss Marple thought of a shopkeeper who wore stolen gems, his lies thin as glass. Clara clutched her shawl. "Mr. Lyle's been kind, but Reginald didn't." "Trust him," said money was Miss Minchin's. He was going to prove it. Her voice trembled, and she glanced at Lyle, nervous. Lyle's face tightened, but his smile held. Nonsense, Mrs. Hawthorne. Just a mix-up. I've fixed it. All see these papers. Everything's in order. He pushed the stack toward her, his tone too eager. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, but her voice was sweet. How thorough, Mr. Lyle. Did you find anything odd in those books? Mr. Hawthorne was so careful. Her question was polite, but it probed, seeking the ledger Betsy mentioned. Lyle hesitated, just a heartbeat. Nothing odd, just old errors. I was checking them that night, in my office, like I said. His fingers tugged his scarf, a nervous tick, and Miss Marple noted it. She thought of a butler who lied about accounts, caught by a maid's find, before she could press. The door opened, and Dr. Weston entered, his face drawn, his bag clutched tight. Mrs. Hawthorne, I've brought your tonic. He saw Lyle and Miss Marple, stiffening. Miss Marple, still visiting. Brady's arrest should ease things. His voice was polite, but his hands shook, betraying him. Miss Marple smiled. It's a start, Doctor. You checked Mr. Hawthorne that night, didn't you? Left by 9. Her question was kind, but it tested, catching his flinch. Weston nodded, too fast. Yes, routine visit. His heart was weak, told him to rest. Brady's the culprit with that watch. His fingers fumbled the bag, and a paper slipped out, a scribbled note, quickly snatched back. Miss Marple's eyes caught a word, cyanide. Her heart raced, but her face stayed soft. Cyanide, again, tied to the almond smell, the poison book. She thought of a doctor who hid a fatal dose, caught by a patient's letter. You're busy, Doctor, she said. Weston mumbled and left, his steps hurried. Clara whispered, he's been strange. Reginald didn't trust his pills, said they tasted bitter. I told Crane, but he's fixed on Brady. Miss Marple squeezed her hand. We'll find the truth, dear. Mr. Lyle, those papers may, I see one. Just curious. Her request was gentle, but it aimed for the ledger's secrets. Lyle's smile froze. They're private, Miss Marple. Business matters. He gathered the papers, his movements jerky. I'll file them in my office. He left, his heels clicking fast. Miss Mind hummed. Private or incriminating. She thought of a clerk who hid a ledger, caught by a nosy neighbor. Clara, she said, has Lyle been pushy lately? Clara nodded, her eyes scared. He wants me to sign things, says it's for the estate, but I don't understand them, and I found another note this morning in my coat pocket. She pulled out a paper, its words chilling. Dusk seals the fate. The handwriting was neat, like the 2nd, 4th, and 5th notes, with dusk linking them all. Miss Marple's breath caught, but her face stayed calm. A 6th note, in Clara's pocket. Someone close was taunting her. She thought of a blackmailer who slipped notes into bags, caught by a servant's eye. This is important, Clara. May I keep it? Clara nodded, and Miss Marple tucked it with the others, her mind racing. Who's been near your coat? Clara frowned. Everyone, Lyle, Evelyn, Weston, even Lily. It hangs in the hall. Her voice trembled, and she clutched her shawl tighter. Miss Marple nodded, filing it away. A household full of shadows, slipping notes. She was about to ask more when Lily crept in, her pirate book clutched, her eyes red. Mother, she whispered, is it safe now? With Brady gone? Clara pulled her close. Yes, darling, Miss Marple's helping. Lily glanced at Miss Marple, her hands trembling, and sat, hugging the book. Miss Marple smiled gently. Lily, you're brave. Did you ever see Mr. Lyle acting odd? Maybe near the study. Her question was soft, but it probed, seeking Lily's secret. Lily shook her head, too fast. No. He's always in his office. I was in my room that night, reading. Her voice cracked, and her fingers dug into the book, betraying her fear. Miss Marple thought of a girl who lied about a theft, her hands shaking just the same. It's all right, dear, Miss Marple said. But if you saw anything a shadow, maybe I'm here. Lily nodded, but her eyes stayed down, locked in silence. The door swung open, and Miss Evelyn stormed in, her face tight. Mrs. Hawthorne, Lily's late for lessons. This fuss isn't helping. Her eyes flicked to Miss Marple, cold as ice. You're poking too much. Miss Marple smiled, unruffled. Just helping, Miss Evelyn. I hear you're gardening again near the fountain. Found anything? Her question was light, but it stung, catching Evelyn's flinch. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Just pruning. I was in the schoolroom that night, working late, not your concern. Her voice was sharp, and she turned to Clara. I'll take Lily. She grabbed Lily's arm, pulling her out, leaving the book behind. Miss Marple picked it up, casual-like, and flipped it open. A folded paper fell out, a list in Lily's hand. Lyle Money, Eva Lanky. Her heart raced, but she tucked it away, unnoticed by Clara. Lily was watching, noting suspects, dangerous for a scared girl. Clara sighed. Evelyn's so harsh. Lily's terrified of her. And those notes, they're killing me. Miss Marple squeezed her hand. We're close, dear. I'll come tomorrow. But her thoughts were on Lyle's ledger, Lily's list, Weston's cyanide note, Evelyn's digging. Brady was a decoy. The real shadow was here. She left the manor, stopping at Mrs. Price's shop for one last listen. The talk was all Brady, but Mrs. Price whispered, My nephew saw Lyle near the study last night, with a small box, looked heavy. And Weston dropped a bottle at the chemist, melled like almonds. Miss Marple's heart raced. A box, a bottle. Cyanide again. She thought of a thief, caught with a stolen chest, his lies crumbling. Thank you, Mrs. Price, she said, her mind planning her next step. Back at her cottage, she lit the fire and picked up her knitting. The shawl grew pink and soft, but her thoughts were hard, slicing through the clues. Lyle's wealth, Lily's list, Weston's note, Evelyn's key, Brady's watch, a hidden box. Dusk seals the fate, her needles clicked. A manager's motive, she murmured, and it's shining through. Chapter 10. The governess's grudge. The morning breeze rustled through St. Mary Mead, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming roses. Miss Jane Marple stood at her cottage door, her knitting bag slung over her arm, her sharp blue eyes scanning the village's quiet lanes. The pink shawl she'd been knitting waited by the hearth, but her thoughts were tethered to Willow Grange, where Reginald Hawthorne's death cast a dark web. 6 cryptic notes: beware the shadow at dusk. The dusk hides the truth. The shadow moves at dusk. The dusk will fall. Dusk brings the end, and dusk seals the fate gnawed at her mind like a stubborn knot. The locked study, the almond-like smell, Lily's secret drawings, Lyle's hidden ledger, Weston's cyanide vial, and Tom Brady's tunet arrest clues, stacked like logs, but the fire of truth needed kindling. Miss Marple knew secrets spilled, when tempers flared, like the time a cook's outburst revealed a stolen brooch. Today, she'd target Miss Evelyn, the governess, whose cold eyes and sneaky deeds hinted at a grudge sharp enough to kill. Miss Evelyn was a thorny figure, snappy and always in the wrong place. Village gossip buzzed about her late-night digging, burned letters, and a key scene in her hand near the study. Betsy caught her muttering about freedom, and Clara said she clashed with Hawthorne over Lily's lessons. Miss Marple thought of a nanny in St. Mary Mead who snapped at her master, hiding a bitter heart. Evelyn's claim of being in the schoolroom the night Hawthorne died didn't match Betsy's sighting of her with a key at midnight. She'd visit Willow Grange, using Clara's trust to probe Evelyn, and stop by the village to sift through chatter. St. Mary Mead's whispers were a compass, and Miss Marple knew every direction. She stepped out, her black shoes tapping the path. The village humcarts creaking, neighbours chatting, hens clucking. The air was crisp, but gossip hung thick. Miss Marple headed for Mrs. Wicks's tea shop, where scones came with a side of secrets. Miss Marple, Mrs. Wicks called, waving her to a window table. "You're after Brady's arrest, I reckon, but folks say he's innocent." My boy heard Crane mutterings, says the watch was slipped in Brady's coat, but he's sticking with the arrest to save face. Her eyes gleamed, hungry for Miss Marple's take. Miss Marple smiled, pouring tea. "Brady's case is shaky. Mrs. Wicks, that watch feels planted. What's the talk about Miss Evelyn?" Her question was soft, but it dug, chasing the governesses. Trail. Mrs. Wicks leaned close, her voice low. "Plenty. My cousin's girl cleans at the Manor says. Evelyn's been tearing up papers in her room, burning bits in a tin. And the gardener saw her digging by the fountain again, late last night, looking frantic. Reckon she's hiding something. Oh, and Clara's been jumpy, says Evelyn's too harsh with Lily." Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. Burned papers, frantic digging Evelyn was unraveling. She thought of a teacher who burned a diary to hide her shame. "Curious," she said. "And the others? Lyle, Weston, Lily?" Mrs. Wicks nodded. "Lyle's been at the pub, flashing cashmere hat too. Weston's been at the chemist, buying powders, looked guilty. Lily's been in the attic, scribbling in a notebook. My niece saw her hide it under a floorboard." Miss Marple sipped her tea, filing it away. Lyle's wealth, Weston's powders, Lily's notebook threads, tightening. She thought of a maid who hid a letter, caught by a servant's glance. "Thank you. Mrs. Wicks, I'll check on Clara, she's scared." She left a coin and stepped out, the village's buzz trailing her. Her next stop was the church, where Mrs. Bantry was fussing with hymn books. "Jane," she boomed, her eyes sparkling. "Off to Willow Grange. You're onto something, Aunt. Brady's arrest is hogwash. I bet you know it." She grinned, eager for news. Miss Marple chuckled, adjusting her hat. "Just visiting Dolly. Brady's watch is too convenient." "What's the talk about, Miss Evelyn?" Her question was light, but it fished, seeking the governess's grudge. Mrs. Bantry leaned close, whispering, "Oh, she's a piece of work. My maid says Evelyn's been writing letters, then tearing them up." And the milkman heard her arguing. "With Lyle in the garden, something about keeping quiet. Lily's terrified of her, won't even look at her during lessons." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Letters, arguments, Lily's fear-Volin's web was thick. She thought of a governess who quarrelled with a butler, hiding a theft. "Interesting," she said. "Any word on the others?" Mrs. Bantry nodded. "Lyle's been asking about Hawthorne's safe to nosy. Weston's been at the manor late, carrying a heavy case. Clara's been asking the vicar about poisons, thinks her tea tastes odd." Miss Marple thanked her and headed to Willow Grange, her thoughts spinning. Poison fears, a safe, late visits Willow Grange was a storm brewing. She thought of a wife who tasted poison in her soup, catching her cook. The manor's grey walls loomed, its windows dark despite the sun. The policeman at the gate, now a friend, waved her through. Miss Marple, back again. Brady's done for, but you're not convinced, eh? His grin was cheeky, but Miss Marple smiled, noting his doubt in Crane's case. Inside, Betsy met her, her apron twisted tight. Miss Marple, Mrs. Hawthorne's in the parlour with Miss Evelyn. She's been sharp-snapped at Lily for dropping a book, and I saw something in Evelyn's room, a locked box under her bed. Looked old, like it's hiding something. Her eyes were wide, scared to speak. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her voice was kind. You're a star, Betsy. Keep that quiet. Anything else? Her question was soft, coaxing more. Betsy whispered, heard Evelyn on the stairs last night. Near the study, dropped a paper, burned it quick when she saw me. Had the word dusk on it. She scurried off, leaving Miss Marple to ponder. Another dusk paper, a locked box. Evelyn was neck deep in secrets. She thought of a nanny who burned a note, caught by a maid's eye. The parlour was warm, with sunlight streaming through tall windows. Clara sat on a sofa, her face pale, while Miss Evelyn stood, her arms crossed, her eyes cold. Clara looked up, relieved. Miss Marple, thank you for coming. I'm so tired of these notes. She clutched a handkerchief, her hands shaking. Miss Marple sat beside her, her knitting bag at her feet. You're brave, dear. Another note, you said. Tell me about it. Her question was gentle, but it probed, seeking the latest thread. Clara nodded, pulling a paper from her pocket. Found it in my shawl this morning. It read, Dusk buries all. The handwriting was neat, like the second, fourth, fifth, and sixth notes, with dusk linking them. It's the seventh, Miss Marple. Someone's tormenting me. Miss Marple's breath caught, but her face stayed soft. A seventh note in Clara's shawl. Someone close was playing a cruel game. She thought of a blackmailer who hid notes in clothes, caught by a servant's glance. This is serious, Clara. May I keep it? Clara nodded, and Miss Marple tucked it with the others, her mind racing. Miss Evelyn, you've been with Claracine. Anyone near her things? Evelyn's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing. No, I've been teaching Lily. This note nonsense is upsetting her. She's behind on her work. I was in the garden that night, walking, saw nothing. Her voice was sharp, and her hands clenched, betraying her. Miss Marple smiled, noting, the Betsy saw her with a key, not in the garden. Of course, she said. Teaching's hard with all this trouble. Were you close to Mr. Hawthorne? Her question was polite, but it stung, testing Evelyn's grudge. Evelyn's face hardened. Not close. He was. Controlling. Always meddling with Lily's lessons, saying I was too soft. I did my job, that's all. Her tone was bitter, and her eyes flicked to Clara, then away. Miss Marple thought of a teacher who hated her boss, caught stealing his pens. Clara sighed. Reginald was strict with everyone. Evelyn didn't like it. She argued with him often. I told Crane, but he stuck on Brady. Miss Marple nodded, filing it away. Arguments, bitterness motive, clear as day. She was about to ask more when Mr. Lyle strode in, his smile slick as oil. Mrs. Hawthorne, I've checked the rent's all fine. He saw Miss Marple and bowed. Miss Marple, still helping. Brady's arrest must be a weight off. Miss Marple smiled, noting his new silk tie. It's a start, Mr. Lyle. You're sure Brady's guilty? You were in your office that night, yes? Her question was sweet, but it probed, catching his twitch. Lyle's smile faltered. Yes, working late. Brady's a thief watch, proves it. I saw him near the gate once, shifty as ever. His fingers tugged his tie, a nervous tick, and Miss Marple noted it. She thought of a clerk who blamed a beggar to hide his theft before she could press. Dr. Weston entered, his face pale, his bag clutched tight. Mrs. Hawthorne, your medicine. He saw Evelyn and Miss Marple, stiffening. Miss Marple, still. Here. Brady's the man, surely. His voice was tight, and his hands fumbled, nearly dropping a vial. Miss Marple smiled. Perhaps, Doctor, you left by 9 that night, you said. Her question was kind, but it stung, catching his flinch. Weston nodded, too fast. Yes, checked Hawthorne's heart, nothing wrong then. Brady's watch seals it. His fingers shook, and Miss Marple thought of a doctor who lied about a dose. Caught by a nurse's note, Clara whispered, Reginald didn't trust his pills. Said they were bitter. I'm scared to take mine. Weston's face reddened. Nonsense. I've checked everything. Take your tonic, Mrs. Hawthorne. He left, his steps quick, leaving a tense silence. Miss Marple squeezed Clara's hand. We'll sort it, dear. Miss Evelyn, you're in the garden, often seen anything odd? Near the fountain, maybe. Her question was soft, but it aimed for Evelyn's digging. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Just roses. I walked to clear my head. You're too nosy, Miss Marple. She turned to Clara. I'll check on Lily. She stormed out, her heels snapping. Miss Marple's mind hummed. Nosy or too close. Evelyn's digging, her lies, her temper grudge was the word. She thought of a nanny who buried stolen goods. Caught by a maid. Clara, she said, was Evelyn. Unhappy with Reginald. Clara nodded, her eyes scared. Very. He criticized her work, threatened to fire her. She hated him. I heard her say he'd pay one night. I told Crane, but he ignored it. Miss Marple's heart raced. A threat to pay. That was motive, bold and raw. She was about to ask more when Lily slipped in, her pirate book clutched, her eyes red. Mother, she whispered, is it safe now? Clara pulled her close. Yes, darling. Miss Marple's here. Lily glanced at Miss Marple, her hands trembling, and sat, hugging the book. Miss Marple smiled gently. Lily, you're strong. Did you ever hear Miss Evelyn argue with your stepfather? Her question was soft, but it probed, seeking Lily's secret. Lily shook her head, too fast. No, she was always teaching me. I was in my room that night. Reading. Her voice cracked, and her fingers dug into the book, betraying her fear. Miss Marple thought of a girl who lied about a fight, her eyes giving her away. It's all right, dear, Miss Marple said. But if you heard anything a shadow, maybe I'm here. Lily nodded, but her eyes stayed down, locked in silence. Clara sighed. She's been like this since the notes. Hides in the attic now. Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts on Lily's notebook, Evelyn's box, Lyle's ledger, Weston's vial. Brady was a distraction. The shadow was here. She picked up Lily's book, casual-like, and a folded paper fell out a sketch of a key, labelled Evelyn. Her heart raced, but she tucked it away, unnoticed by Clara or Lily. Another clue, dangerous for a girl to draw. She left the parlour, promising to return, and passed Betsy in the hall. Miss, Betsy whispered, saw Evelyn in the study just now, looking at the desk. She hid something when she saw me. A small bottle, smelled sharp. Miss Marple's heart raced. A bottle like Weston's. Cyanide or a trick. She thought of a nurse who hid poison, caught by a servant. "Thank you, Betsy," she said, her mind planning her next move. Outside, the village was settling into noon, the sun high. Miss Marple stopped at Mrs. Price's shop, where gossip flowed like water. "Miss Marple," Mrs. Price called, weighing apples. "Heard about Evelyn. My nephew saw her with a spade last night, digging by the fountain, and Lyle's been at the bank again, asking about a locked box." Miss Marple's heart skipped. A locked box, like Betsy's find. She thought of a thief who hid stolen cash. Caught by a teller's tip. "Interesting," she said. "Any more about Brady?" Mrs. Price nodded. "Aye, folks say Crane's doubting now watch was too clean, no prints. But he's stubborn, won't let Brady go." She grinned. "You'll crack it, miss." Miss Marple smiled, but her thoughts were on Evelyn's bottle. Lily's sketch, Lyle's box, Weston's lies. St. Mary Mead saw everything, and she saw more. Back at her cottage, she lit the fire and picked up her knitting. The shawl grew, pink and warm, but her thoughts were cold, slicing through the clues. Evelyn's grudge, Lily's fear, Lyle's theft, Weston's nerves, Brady's watch, a hidden bottle. Dusk berries all dot. Her needles clicked. A governess's grudge, she murmured, and it's digging its own grave. Chapter 11. A second clue. Morning sun crept over St. Mary Mead, brushing the villagers' cottages with soft gold. Miss Jane Marple stood at her cottage door, her knitting bag ready, her sharp blue eyes scanning the quiet lanes. The pink shawl she'd been knitting waited by the fire, but her thoughts were fixed on Willow Grange, where Reginald Hawthorne's death wove a dark tangle. 7 cryptic notes: beware the shadow at dusk. The dusk hides the truth. The shadow moves at dusk. The dusk will fall. Dusk brings the end. Dusk seals the fate. And dusk berries all stung her mind like nettles. The locked study, the almond-like smell, Lily's fearful drawings, Lyle's hidden ledger, Evelyn's buried bottle, Weston's cyanide note, and Tom Brady's too tedious arrest, clues piled like stones. But the path to truth was crooked. Miss Marple knew secrets hid in overlooked corners, like the time a lost button caught a thief. Today she'd return to the study, chasing a second clue, and sift village gossip for more threads. The study had already given her plenty. The poisoned book, the scratched sill, a hidden note, but Miss Marple sensed it held more. Betsy's hint of a key under the rug, and Mrs. Wicks's talk of another near the desk, nagged her. Hawthorne's notes suggested he feared something or someone, and Clara's claim that he was probing a secret fit the puzzle. Miss Marple thought of a farmer in St. Mary Mead who hid a letter, caught by his wife's sharp eye. She'd visit Willow Grange, using Clara's trust to search the study again, and stop by the village to catch the latest chatter. St. Mary Mead's whispers were a lantern, and Miss Marple knew how to light the way. She stepped out, her black shoes tapping the path. The village buzzed, carts rattling, neighbours gossiping, dogs yapping. The air smelled of fresh dew and Mrs. Price's pies, but rumours hung thicker. Miss Marple headed for the post office, where Miss Hartnell's sharp tongue sliced through every tale. Miss Hartnell barked, sorting letters. After Brady's arrest, folks say he's innocent, but Crane's stubborn. You're chasing the real killer, aren't you? Her eyes gleamed, fond but nosy. Miss Marple smiled, buying a stamp. Just curious, Miss Hartnell. Brady's watch is too neat. What's the talk about Willow Grange? Her question was soft, but it dug, seeking fresh clues. Miss Hartnell leaned over the counter. Plenty. My postman says Clara's been getting more notes, found one in her glove box yesterday, but she hid it quick. Lyle's been mailing letters, plain envelopes, no name. Evelyn's been at the station, asking about trains, like she's planning to bolt. Weston's been burning papers against meld like chemicals. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. Another note, secret letters, escape plans, burned chemicals, threads weaving tight. She thought of a postmistress who caught a forger by his mail. Curious, she said. And Lily, any word? Miss Hartnell nodded. Hiding in the attic, scribbling in that notebook. My boy saw her drop a paper had shadow on it. Like those notes. Reckon she knows something. Miss Marple thanked her and left, her thoughts spinning. Lily's notebook, Lyle's letters, Evelyn's trains, Weston's fire willow. Grange was a storm of secrets. She thought of a girl who scribbled clues, caught by a neighbour's glance. Her next stop was Mrs. Wicks's tea shop, where gossip flowed like tea. Miss Marple, Mrs. Wicks called, waving her to a corner table. Brady's arrest is falling apart. My boy says Crane's, doubting the watch, but won't admit it. You're after the truth, eh? Her grin was wide, eager for news. Miss Marple poured tea, her smile gentle. Brady's case is shaky, Mrs. Wicks. What's the talk about the study? Heard anything new? Her question was light, but it aimed. For the hidden key, Mrs. Wicks leaned close, whispering. My nephew cleans at the manor, says he saw a glint under the study desk, like a small key. Crane ignored it, but it's there. And Clara's been asking about locks, thinks someone's sneaking in her room. Lyle's been at the bank, asking about a safe deposit box. Evelyn's been digging again, near the roses. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her face stayed soft. A key under the desk, new locks, a safe box, more digging, clues piling up. She thought of a maid who found a key, cracking a theft. Interesting, she said. Any word on Weston or Lily? Mrs. Wicks nodded. Weston's been at the chemist, buying bottles smelled sharp, like that study stink. Lily's been in the garden, hiding papers. My niece saw her bury one by the fountain. Miss Marple thanked her and stepped out, the village square bustling. The study's key was calling, but Lily's buried papers and Evelyn's digging tugged. Her thoughts. She thought of a boy who buried stolen coins, caught by a farmer's eye. Willow Grange was her next stop, and the study her goal. The manor's grey walls loomed, its ivy curling like dark fingers. The policeman at the gate, now. A friend waved her through. Miss Marple, back again. Crane's, sure, Brady's guilty, but folks say you know better. His grin was cheeky, but Miss Marple smiled. Noting the villagers' doubt in the arrest. Inside, Betsy met her, her apron twisted tight. Miss Marple, Mrs. Hawthorne's in the library. She's a wreck, found another note in her book this morning. And I saw something in the study, a loose board by the shelf. Looked like it's been pried up. Her eyes were wide, scared to speak. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her voice was kind. You're sharp, Betsy. Keep that quiet. Anything else? Her question was soft, coaxing more. Betsy whispered, heard Evelyn arguing with Weston last night in the hall. Something about keeping it hidden. They stopped when they saw me. She scurried off, leaving Miss Marple to ponder. A loose board, an argument, secrets in every corner. She thought of a butler who hid cash under a floor, caught by a maid. The library was grand, with tall shelves and a cold hearth. Clara sat in an armchair, her face pale, clutching a new note. "Miss Marple," she gasped, her voice shaky. "Another one found it in my novel." She held out a paper, its words chilling. "Dusk holds the key." The handwriting was neat, like the second, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh notes. With dusk linking them all, Miss Marple's breath caught, but her face stayed soft. An eighth note, in a book. Someone was bold, taunting Clara under her nose. She thought of a blackmailer who hid notes in pages, caught by a servant's eye. "This is serious, Clara. May I keep it?" Clara nodded, and Miss Marple tucked it with the others, her mind racing. "Who's been near your books?" Clara frowned. "Everyone, Lily, Evelyn, Lyle, Weston. They're all in here sometimes." Her hands trembled, and she clutched her shawl. "I'm so scared, Miss Marple." Miss Marple squeezed her hand. "We're close, dear. I'd like to see the study against something's nagging me." Her request was gentle, but it aimed for the loose board and key. Clara nodded, pulling out the study key. "It's locked, but I trust you. Let's go now." They climbed the staircase, passing grim Hawthorne portraits. The study door was heavy oak, and Clara unlocked it, a chill hitting them with that faint bitter smell omens, sharper now. Miss Marple's nose twitched, but she stepped inside, her eyes scanning. The room was as before, mahogany desk, tall, shelves, window with a scratched sill. The rug's curled corner hid the stain she'd seen, and the poisoned book was still askew. Miss Marple moved slowly, her fingers brushing the desk. No new papers, but the blotter was slightly lifted, as if moved. She thought of a staged desk, like a maid who tidied to hide a theft. Clara stayed by the door, her voice shaky. "It feels wrong here, like he's watching." Miss Marple smiled, reassuring. "It's just a room, dear. Let's look closer." She knelt by the rug. Lifting it, there was Betsy's key, small and brass, perfect for a drawer. Her heart raced, but she pocketed it quietly, unnoticed by Clara. Then she moved to the shelf, spotting the loose board Betsy mentioned. She pried it up with a letter opener, revealing a folded paper, yellowed and creased. It read, "The truth lies in the dusk." The handwriting was Hawthorne's, shaky like the first note, but only a fragment, torn at the edge. Miss Marple's breath caught, but her face stayed calm. A second clue, hidden by Hawthorne himself. She thought of a farmer who hid a will, caught by his son's search. "Clara," she said, holding it up, "look at this, found behind the shelf. It's your husband's hand." Clara gasped, stepping closer. Another note, part of one. "What does it mean?" Miss Marple tucked it into her bag. "It means he knew something, maybe, who the shadow was. We'll figure it out." Her mind raced. Hawthorne was investigating, leaving clues, but why tear this one? She thought of a coded letter that cracked a smuggling ring. The desk drawers rattled as she tried them. The key fit the top one, clicking open. Inside was a single ledger page, marked with red ink, Lyle Short 5,000. Her heart skipped. Proof of theft, hidden by Hawthorne. She thought of a shopkeeper's ledger that caught a clerk's crime. "Clara," she said, "this shows Lyle was stealing. Did you know?" Clara's eyes widened. "Reginald said so, but I never saw proof." "Lyle's been so kind, could he?" Her voice trembled, and she clutched the doorframe. Miss Marple nodded, tucking the page away. "It's a start, dear," but her thoughts were on the loose board. The key, The fragment Hawthorne was close to a truth that got him killed. She checked the window, still scratched, latch loose. A shadow could slip through, silent as dusk. She thought of a burglar who climbed a trellis, caught by a gardener's lamp. Before they could leave, Mr. Lyle appeared, his smile slick. Mrs. Hawthorne, I.O., Miss Marple, in the study. His eyes flicked to the desk, then the shelf, a flash of panic crossing his face. Miss Marple smiled sweetly. Just helping, Mr. Lyle. Found some papers interesting, don't you think? Her question was polite, but it stung, watching his reaction. Lyle's smile froze. Papers, just old bills, I'm sure. I was in my office that night, as I said nothing. To do with this. His fingers tugged his silk tie, and Miss Marple noted it. She thought of a clerk who lied about ledgers, caught by a maid's find. You're thorough, she said, her tone warm but her eyes cold. Lyle mumbled and left, his steps quick. Clara whispered, he's scared. That ledger, it's proof, isn't it? Miss Marple nodded, but her thoughts were on Lyle's panic, Evelyn's digging, Weston's lies. The fragment was a second clue, pointing to Hawthorne's hunt. She was about to ask more when Miss Evelyn stormed in, her face tight. Mrs. Hawthorne, what's this? Poking in the study. Her eyes flicked to Miss Marple, cold as frost. You're meddling too much. Miss Marple smiled, unruffled. Just helping, Miss Evelyn. You're often in the garden scene, anything near the fountain. Her question was light, but it probed. Chasing her digging, Evelyn's jaw clenched. Just weeding. I was in the schoolroom that night, working late, not your business. Her voice was sharp, and she turned to Clara. Lily's waiting. She left, her heels snapping. Miss Marple noted the Betsy saw her with a key, not in the schoolroom. A governess hiding tracks, digging for what? She thought of a nanny who buried stolen jewels, caught by a maid. Clara, she said, has Evelyn been near the study lately? Clara nodded, her eyes scared. Betsy saw her there yesterday, looking at the desk. She said she was cleaning, but I don't believe it. Miss Marple's mind hummed. Evelyn in the study, Lyle's panic. Weston's cyanide, shadows everywhere. She was about to reply when Dr. Weston entered, his face pale, his bag clutched tight. Mrs. Hawthorne, your tonic. He saw Miss Marple and stiffened. Miss Marple, still here. Brady's guilty, surely. Miss Marple smiled. Perhaps. Doctor, you left by 9 that night? Yes. Her question was kind, but it stung, catching his flinch. Weston nodded, too fast. Yes, checked Hawthorne's heart fine, then. Brady's watch proves it. His fingers fumbled, dropping a pen, and Miss Marple saw a paper in his bag marked cyanide dose. Her heart raced, but she stayed calm, thinking of a doctor caught by his own notes. Clara whispered, Reginald didn't trust his pills. I'm scared, Miss Marple. Miss Marple squeezed her hand. We're close, dear. But her thoughts were on the fragment, the ledger. The key Hawthorne's hunt was the key to his death. She left the study, Clara locking it, and passed. Lily in the hall, clutching her pirate book, her eyes red. Lily, Miss Marple said gently, did your stepfather ever talk about a secret? Maybe in the study. Her question was soft, but it probed, seeking her fear. Lily shook her head, too fast. No, I was reading that night. I didn't know anything. Her voice cracked, and she ran off, leaving Miss Marple to ponder. Lily knew something. Her fear was a signpost. Outside the village was bustling, the sun high. Miss Marple stopped at Mrs. Price's shop, where gossip roared. Miss Marple, Mrs. Price called, weighing pears. Heard about Lyle, my nephew saw. Him with a lockbox, sneaking out back. And Evelyn's been at the chemist, asking about poisons, said it's for rats. Miss Marple's heart skipped. A lockbox, poison questions, closing in. She thought of a thief caught with a stolen chest, his lies crumbling. Interesting, she said. Any more on Brady? Mrs. Price grinned. Crane's wobbling set. Brady's watch had no prints. Folk reckon he'll free him soon. She handed Miss Marple a pair. You'll solve it, Miss Marple smiled, but her thoughts were on the fragment. Lily's fear, Lyle's box, Evelyn's poison, Weston's. Note, St. Mary Mead saw all, and she saw more. Back at her cottage, she lit the fire and picked up her knitting. The shawl grew, pink and warm, but her thoughts were cold, slicing through the clues. A second clue, a stolen ledger, a scratched sill, a buried bottle, a cyanide note. Dusk holds. The key, her needles clicked. A second clue, she murmured, and it's unlocking the truth. Chapter 12. The shadow revealed the late afternoon sun dipped low over St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across the village's tidy cottages and winding lanes. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cosy cottage, her knitting needles clicking softly, the pink shawl growing in her lap. But her thoughts were far from wool. They were locked on Willow Grange, where Reginald Hawthorne's death had spun a web of secrets. 8 cryptic notes beware. The shadow at dusk, the dusk hides the truth, the shadow moves at dusk. The dusk will fall, dusk brings the end, dusk seals the fate, dusk buries all, and dusk holds the key burned in her mind like embers. The locked study, the almond-like smell, Lily's fearful drawings, Lyle's stolen ledger, Evelyn's buried bottle, Weston's cyanide note, and Tom Brady's false arrest clues had piled like leaves. And now the wind of truth was stirring. Miss Marple knew secrets cracked when pressed gently, like the time a maid's tearful confession revealed a stolen ring. Today, she'd unraveled the mystery, bringing justice to Willow Grange and peace to St. Mary Mead. The second clue torn. Letter fragment reading. The truth lies in the dusk, and a ledger page proving Lyle's theft had shown Hawthorne was hunting a secret. The notes, the poisoned book, and the scratched windowsill pointed to murder, not a heart attack, as Inspector Crane claimed. Village gossip whispered of Evelyn's digging, Weston's burned papers, Lyle's wealth, and Lily's hidden notebook, each a thread in the tapestry. Miss Marple suspected a plot deeper than one killer perhaps, a pair, tied by greed or fear. She thought of a St. Mary Mead scandal where a couple conspired to steal, caught by a neighbour's ear. She'd visit Willow Grange one last time, using Clara's trust to gather the household and expose the truth, and stop by the village to catch final whispers. St. Mary Mead's chatter was a mirror, and Miss Marple saw every reflection she pinned on her hat, grabbed her knitting bag, and stepped into the village. The air was cool, smelling of fresh grass and Mrs. Wicks's scones, but gossip hung heavy. The square buzzed farmers, haggling, maids whispering, children chasing a cat. Miss Marple headed for Mrs. Price's shop, where the shopkeeper's broom swept up news as fast as dust. Miss Marple, Mrs. Price called, leaning on her broom. Brady's still locked up, but folks say Crane's wobbling watch had no prints. You're close to the truth, aren't you? Her eyes gleamed, eager for a hint. Miss Marple smiled, picking up a loaf. It's a tangle, Mrs. Price. Brady's arrest feels wrong. What's the latest on Willow Grange? Her question was gentle, but it dug, seeking final clues. Mrs. Price nodded, her voice low. Plenty. My nephew saw Evelyn with a spade last night. Digging by the fountain again looked like she found something, a small box. Lyle's been at the bank, asking about a locked vault. Weston's been at the manor, carrying a heavy case smelled sharp, like that study stink. And Lily she dropped a paper in the garden, had shadow on it. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. Evelyn's box, Lyle's vault, Weston's case, Lily's paper threads pulling tight. She thought of a thief who dug up stolen cash, caught by a servant's glance. Curious, she said. Any more notes for Clara? Mrs. Price grinned. Aye, she found one in her scarf today, maid. Told my cousin. Didn't show it, but she's scared stiff. She handed Miss Marple the loaf. You'll crack it, Miss. Miss Marple thanked her and headed to the tea shop, where Mrs. Wicks waved her to a corner table. Miss Marple cranes in a huff says Brady's guilty, but folk reckon he's wrong. You're after the killer, eh? Her voice carried, and heads turned. Miss Marple poured tea, her smile soft. Brady's watch is too neat, Mrs. Wicks. What's the talk about the household? Her question was light, but it aimed for the heart of the gossip. Mrs. Wicks leaned close, whispering. Clara's locked her room, thinks someone's sneaking in. Lyle's been seen with a lockbox, hid it quick when Betsy passed. Evelyn's been at the chemist, asking about poisons, again said it's for rats. Weston dropped a bottle at the manor maid, says it smelled like almonds. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her face stayed calm. A lockbox, poison questions, another almond smelt clues closing in. She thought of a cook who hid poison, caught by a maid's nose. Thank you, Mrs. Wicks. I'll check on Clarou, she's frightened. She left, the villagers' whispers, a chorus in her ears. Willow Grange's grey walls loomed, its ivy curling like dark veins. The policeman at the gate, now a friend, waved her through. Miss Marple, back again. Cranes, sure, Brady's the man, but you're not fooled, eh? His grin was cheeky, but Miss Marple smiled, noting the villagers' growing doubt. Inside, Betsy met her, her apron twisted tight. Miss Marple, Mrs. Hawthorne's in the parlour with Lily. She's a wreck found that note in her scarf. And I saw something Evelyn and Weston whispering in the study last night, looked guilty when they saw me. Her eyes were wide, scared to speak. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her voice was kind. You're a gem, Betsy. Keep that quiet. Show me the note, if Clara's willing. She thought of a maid who overheard a plot, cracking a theft. Betsy led her to the parlour, where Clara sat, pale as milk, clutching a new note. Lily was beside her, hugging her pirate book, her eyes red. Miss Marple, Clara gasped, her voice shaky. Another note in my scarf. She held out a paper, its words chilling. Dusk ends the game. The handwriting was neat, like the second, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th notes. With dusk linking them all, Miss Marple's breath caught, but her face stayed soft. A 9th note, in a scarf. Someone was bold, taunting Clara under her nose. She thought of a blackmailer who hid notes in clothes, caught by a servant's eye. This is serious, Clara. May I keep it? Clara nodded, and Miss Marple tucked it with the others, her mind racing. Lily, dear, have you seen anyone near your mother's things? Her question was gentle, but it probed, seeking the girl's secret. Lily shook her head, too fast. No, I was reading. I don't know. Her voice cracked, and her fingers dug into the book, betraying her fear. Miss Marple thought of a girl who lied about a theft, her hands shaking just the same. Clara sighed. She's been so scared since the notes. Hides in the attic now. Miss Marple squeezed Clara's hand. We're close, dear. I'd like to gather everyone, Lyle, Evelyn, Weston in the library. I've found something that needs explaining. Her tone was calm, but her plan was set a classic trap, like the time she cornered a liar at a village tea. Clara nodded, and Betsy was sent to fetch the household. The library was grand, with tall shelves and a cold hearth. Miss Marple sat in an armchair, her knitting bag at her feet, as Clara, Lily, Mr. Lyle, Miss Evelyn, and Dr. Weston filed in. Lyle's smile was slick, but his eyes darted. Evelyn's face was tight, her hands clenched. Weston's fingers fumbled his bag, his face pale. Inspector Crane, summoned by Clara's call, stood by the door, his moustache bristling, skeptical but curious. Betsy hovered in the corner, her eyes wide. Miss Marple smiled, her voice soft but firm. Thank you for coming. Mr. Hawthorne's death is no heart attack. It's murder, and the truth is here, in this room. Her words hung heavy, and faces tensed. She thought of a St. Mary Mead gathering where a thief's blush gave him away. Crane snorted. Nonsense, Miss Marple. Brady's Our Man watch proves it. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. The watch was planted. Inspector. No prints. Too clean. Brady's a thief, perhaps, but not a killer. The real clues are here: the notes, the poison, the study. She pulled out the notes, spreading them on the table. 9 notes, all with dusk, but 2 Hans Hawthorne's, shaky scrawl, and another, neater, taunting Clara. Lyle shifted, his smile fading. What's this got to do with us? I was in my office that night. Evelyn snapped. You're wasting time. I was in the schoolroom, working. Weston mumbled. I left by 9, checked his heart. Brady's. Guilty. Miss Marple raised a hand, calm but commanding. Let's start with the study. She held up the letter fragment. The truth lies in the dusk. Hawthorne wrote this, hidden under a board. He was investigating a secret someone. He called the shadow, and this, she showed the ledger page, proves Lyle was stealing thousands. Lyle's face paled, his hands gripping his chair. That's a lie. I fixed those accounts. Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. You were desperate, Mr. Lyle. Hawthorne was about to fire you. But theft alone isn't murder. There's more. She turned to Evelyn. Miss Evelyn, you hated Hawthorne. He meddled with Lily's lessons, threatened your job. Betsy saw you with a key near the study, not in the schoolroom, and you were digging, hiding something. Evelyn's jaw clenched, her voice sharp. I was weeding. You've no proof. Miss Marple smiled, pulling out Lily's sketch of a key. Labeled Evelyn. Lily drew this your key, perhaps. And Betsy found a bottle in your room, smelling of almond cyanide, like the study's stink. She thought of a nanny caught with poison, her lies crumbling. Weston gasped. His bag. Slipping. Cyanide. I never. Miss Marple turned to him, her voice steady. Dr. Weston, you lied about leaving by 9. Mrs. Wicks's brother saw you later. You argued with Hawthorne about his pills, which he said tasted bitter, and your bag held a note cyanide dose. You burned papers, dropped files. Why? Weston's face crumpled, his hands shaking. I didn't kill him. He suspected me, yes, but Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her words cut. You didn't act alone. The notes tell the story. Hawthorns were warnings, beware. The shadow at dusk, the truth lies in the dusk. He feared a plot. The others, neater, were taunts, meant to scare Clara. 2 hands, 1 plan. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. Evelyn and Weston, you were lovers, weren't you? Hawthorne found out, threatened to expose you. You poisoned him to protect your secret and the estate's wealth. Clara gasped, clutching Lily. Lyle's mouth dropped. Crane's eyes widened, his skepticism fading. Evelyn's face twisted, her voice a hiss. That's absurd. You've no proof. Miss Marple held up the notes again. The handwriting years, Evelyn, matches the taunts. You slipped them into Clara's things, cruelly mocking her fear. And Weston, you swapped Hawthorne's pills. With cyanide, using your access, the almond smell, the poison book, your vial all point to you. Lily saw you, Weston, by the study window, not a shadow, but you, sneaking to replace the pills. Lily sobbed, hiding her face. I saw him. I was scared to tell. Weston staggered, his voice breaking. Evelyn, she made me do it. She said we'd lose everything, our future, the money. Hawthorne knew about us, was going to ruin us. Evelyn lunged, her face furious. You coward. You wanted the money too. She turned to Miss Marple, spitting venom. You old hag, you've ruined us. Crane stepped forward, his voice firm. That's enough. You're both under arrest. He signaled the policeman who'd slipped in, and they seized Evelyn and Weston, who slumped, defeated. Betsy's eyes were wide, Clara's tears flowed, and Lily clung to her mother. Miss Marple sighed, her voice gentle. It's over, Clara. Hawthorne's notes were his fight. He was reading a mystery novel. Dusk at the Manor, and used its phrases to warn you. Evelyn and Weston twisted his words, taunting you to cover their tracks. Brady's watch was planted by Lyle, hoping to deflect suspicion from his theft. Lyle flinched, but Miss Marple raised a hand. You're guilty of stealing, Mr. Lyle, but not murder. The police will handle that. Crane nodded, eyeing Lyle, who shrank in his chair. Clara sobbed, hugging Lily. Thank you, Miss Marple. I can breathe now. Miss Marple smiled, patting her hand. You're strong, dear. You and Lily will be fine. She thought of a widow in St. Mary Mead who found peace after a killer's arrest. The library cleared, Crane leading Evelyn and Weston away, Lyle slinking off under police watch. Betsy whispered, You're amazing, miss, and Miss Marple chuckled, tucking her knitting bag closer. Outside, the village was settling into dusk, the sky a soft purple. Miss Marple stopped at Mrs. Wicks's tea shop, where the news had already spread. Miss Marple, Mrs. Wicks gasped, pouring tea. You caught them? Evelyn and Weston lovers poisoning Hawthorne. Brady's free, and Lyle's in trouble. You're a wonder. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her smile quiet. Just an old lady who notices, Mrs. Wicks. But her thoughts were on the notes, the study, Lily's fear clues that fit like her. Knittings, stitches. The village buzzed, marveling at her brilliance, and she let them talk, knowing gossip would weave the tale for years. Back at her cottage, she lit the fire and picked up her knitting. The shawl was nearly done, pink and warm, like the peace settling over St. Mary Mead. She pictured Willow, Grange Clara, and Lily safe. Justice served, shadows gone. The notes, the poison, the dusk all solved, like a puzzle clicked into place. She thought of Hawthorne's last fight, his cryptic warnings, and smiled softly. Human nature, she knew, was predictable, like the villagers' chatter or her steady needles. Her needles clicked. The shadow revealed, she murmured, and dusk is just dusk again.